Well, good morning, everyone. We'll like to get underway. Thank you for coming to Regulatory and Hearings Committee, 20th September. Couple of things. Just a quick reminder, the purpose of today's hearing is to listen to the members of our community as they speak to their submissions on Class 4 gambling venues and the TAB venues policies. Remind colleagues questions are for clarity on points made by the submitter, either verbally or in their written submissions. Of course, following submissions, there'll be an opportunity for all the members to provide a direction to staff, which I see Carmen in the chamber, so welcome, Carmen, and on any other matters that need to be addressed in the deliberations report. Reminder, the report will go up to the Community and Natural Environment meeting on the 26th of October. And I'll tell everyone in the chamber tea room later why that date's important to me. Now, in line with the current season, I'm going to enlighten you with a little bit of what we call Nihongo, or Japanese. So if you can just let me indulge you for a minute. Okay. I haven't been practicing my Japanese of lately, so bear with me. Minasama, konnichiwa. Watashi no namae wa Mark Donovan. Yoroshiku onegaishimasu. Goreiseki no minasama, kyou wa sakura o iwa subarashi hi desu. Kono tokubetsu na kikai o tanoshimi ni gara shiawase to heiwa o oinori shimasu. So translated, that means, ladies and gentlemen, today is a wonderful day to celebrate the Cherry Blossom Festival time. I wish you happiness and peace as you enjoy this special time of the year. Okay, all right. And I've got a little bit of Japanese to finish off with as well, which will hopefully. If you've been out and about and you've seen the beautiful cherry blossoms, I think it's a lovely time of the year, and it reminds me of my time that I lived in Japan. So, hence the reason for that. Right, now, item number 1, apologies. I have full absence from Councillor Milena and Councillor Moko and Councillor Andrew. Now, I know that Councillor Moko, he'll be away getting ready for the big game this weekend, probably buying up large on tissues for when his team loses to my team. There's no other apologies? No, that's it. Okay, if I could have a mover in Councillor Wilson. Yes, and second, Councillor Max. Thank you. All those in favour, say aye. Aye. Ayes have it. Confirmation of agenda. There was no changes to the agenda, was there, Arnold? We're all good to go. Yep, Councillor Wilson move. Second, Councillor Max again. All those in favour, say aye. Aye. Against? No. No. Ayes have it. Declarations of interest. Has anyone got any declarations of interest? No. Okay. Item number 4 is our confirmation of the minutes from the last meeting on August 22nd. I'll move. Councillor Wilson second. All those in favour? Aye. Aye. Against? No. Ayes have it. Motion carried unanimously. Right. So that brings us to our submitters, and I would now like to welcome Jared to the front desk. Jared, are you familiar with the process here?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, cool. All right. Just a reminder, if you want to leave a little bit of time at the end for any
Do I have
question.
a clicker for my PowerPoint?
If you can just say next slide, I can move that for you.
Great, thank you. Good morning, I'm Jared True. I represent the Gaming Machine Association of New Zealand. The association represents the vast majority of gaming machine societies. We're asking you today to expand your current relocation provision to enable a venue to move in any circumstance if it can demonstrate to you on a case-by-case basis that the new location is more suitable in a harm minimisation perspective. We're also asking you to reject any calls to remove the relocation provision altogether. And finally, we're asking you to look at time has come to consider replacing the sinking lid with a cap at current numbers. And we've currently got 376 gaming machines. Just on slide 3, please. So relocations are currently only permitted if you wanted to relocate within a gambling permitted area in a major event. You're only allowed to relocate within a gambling permitted area if there's been a fire, an earthquake, a refusal by the landlord to renew the lease, or the venue's earthquake prone, insanitary or dangerous. My point is we shouldn't have to wait for such a major event to move a venue if the new location is going to be more suitable from a harm minimisation perspective. Just through the next slide, please. We should be able to consider, should be able to come to council, come to this committee on a case-by-case basis. It should be discretionary. We should be able to put a case before you for you to consider when a venue can demonstrate that the new site moving within a gambling permitted area is more desirable from a harm minimisation perspective. If we've got a venue that wants to move from a higher deprivation area to a lower deprivation area, you should be able to consider that on a case-by-case basis. If we've got a venue that's very, very close to a residential area or very close to a sensitive site, a park, playground, we should be able to come to council and put that case to you and have you consider it. Next slide, please. We should also be able to come to you and say, look, we've got a venue, a large venue, an older venue that's looking to move to newer, smaller, modern premises. It may be on a large block of land. I believe that if we move to a smaller, modern premises, that has harm minimisation benefits. Also, if we can move away from larger premises to smaller, modern premises, that frees up a whole lot of land. If we just flick through the next 3 slides, we've got large clubs in New Zealand that are on large blocks of land, which if they were able to freely relocate, there might be opportunity there to use those premises for high density housing, affordable housing. Relocation enables, if we had more flexible relocation, it would facilitate venues moving to newer modern hospitality premises. Those newer modern premises are likely to attract a more affluent clientele. It's going to be great to revitalise our business districts or help to improve the local economy, help to create employment and help to encourage tourism. The next slide will show you who can remember that, the Tarafa Tavern. I remember when I was assembling drench guns going through university, I used to go there on a Friday night after a week of work. It was very much, it wasn't quite a Once Were Warriors type establishment, but it's certainly not like it is now. So this was the first venue that was able to relocate under the relocation provisions, the old Tarafa Tavern. The next slide will show you what it is now. That owner was able to move and take its 18 gaming machines, was able to spend back then $3 million, which is a lot of money back then, and have a new fantastic facility. The next slide will show you what the inside of the old Tarafa Tavern used to look like, and the next slide will show you what it looks like now. So that's fantastic. We should facilitate that, encourage that. If we come to you and we have a venue within a gambling permitted area that wants to move from something like that to something newer, modern, more vibrant, we should be able to put that to you. You should be able to consider it. It should be an option. Next slide, please. So importantly, relocation is a harm minimisation tool. The ability to relocate was introduced by the Maori Party as part of the Gambling Harm Reduction Amendment Bill. The aim was to enable venues to move away from low deprivation areas, to move away from residential areas, to move away from sensitive sites, and to move to more suitable locations. It was not Parliament's intention to limit that to cases of catastrophic events. We shouldn't have to wait for a fire. We shouldn't have to wait for an earthquake. We shouldn't have to wait until the building burns down to move it to a more suitable location from a harm minimisation point of view. Retaining the balance of the relocation provisions is reasonable, it's positive. Having the ability to relocate in the policy as was adopted, what we're talking probably at least 12 years ago now. I've been here each time and we've had many debates as to whether it should be removed, and despite many public hearings, many consultations, the relocation provisions have been retained. There's been no new evidence or no new concern over the last 3 years that would justify removing those sensible relocation provisions that are currently in the policy. Next slide, please. It's of course fair and reasonable to allow venues to establish after a fire, a flood or an earthquake. It's fair to enable venues to move out of earthquake-prone buildings like the current policy does allow. Prohibiting relocation is not going to result in fewer gaming machines. It's just simply going to entrench those venues in unsafe premises. If we don't have the ability to relocate after a major event like a fire or a flood or earthquake, there is the risk that we could have a natural disaster, and then we have a huge loss of community funding that's instant. We saw this in Christchurch. After the Christchurch earthquakes, we lost 11 venues overnight. Now, the funding that comes from our machines is extremely valuable. In the calendar year 2022, Hamilton-based community groups received $8.5 million in grant funding. That's a big tap to turn off overnight in the event of a natural disaster, and that could potentially happen if you remove the relocation provision. The next slide will show you some of the community groups that we support, all the way from rescue helicopters to my kids' junior high school, to soccer teams, netball teams, a whole range of activities that's heavily reliant on our $8.5 million that comes in every year. In relation to the sinking lid, time has come to consider whether it's appropriate to have a cap at current numbers. No one's suggesting we should have more gaming machines, but a cap at current numbers is reasonable to enable that community funding to be sustainable. Our machines here have reduced considerably. We've already lost 17% of our machines since 2015. Next slide, please. Our problem gambling rate by international standards is extremely low, 0.2% of the adult population, and that's all forms of gambling, not just playing on a gaming machine. There's no link between gaming machine numbers and problem gambling rates. Over the last 10 years, we've lost 25% of our machines. The problem gambling rate during that same period has plateaued, stayed exactly the same. We have a whole lot of new harm minimisation regulations that have been passed into law, and they come into full effect on the 1st of December. And this is a game changer, quite significant now. Effectively, we now have a rule that says if you play in our venues, you're only allowed to get cash out once per day. If you were to make 2 cash withdrawals in our venues, we now have a statutory obligation to approach you, to undertake an assessment conversation with you about your gambling, to fill out a 2-page form about you. And if we fail to do any of those, it's a $1,000 fine for not having the conversation, $1,000 fine for not keeping the record, and a $1,000 fine if the venue manager doesn't review that record within 7 days. From the 1st of December, all our ATMs in our venues must be in line of sight from the main bar. We won't be able to have any of our gaming machines visible from outside, and there's now a formal requirement that the venue staff do what we call a gaming room sweep, walk through the room at least 3 times an hour, to record who's in the room, to monitor for length of play, and also to look out for signs of problem gambling. Thank you, and I welcome your questions.
Good. Right, I can see my name. Mayor Southgate, would you like to, sorry, I was looking at the wrong column. Mayor Paula.
I was interested, because I didn't know anything about this, the comment that you made around the New Zealand Māori Party, the Māori Party changing legislation. Could you tell me a little bit more about that, why that happened, and what the basic gist of that was?
Yeah, so it's detailed in my submission where I've gone through and actually included some notes from the Hansard. So Turaura Flavel decided he wanted to make some change in relation to the Gambling Act, and he wanted to facilitate venues moving out of undesirable locations. Previously, there was no statutory ability for us to relocate and to keep our machine numbers. And a venue's not going to move unless it can take its full complement of machine numbers, which that just simply doesn't make economic sense. So Te Reo Flavel saw the sense in that and saw that it was an opportunity to give councils the discretion to allow relocations. And it's up to you as to what conditions and what basis you put those on. And he saw that the reason that you would likely to consider that is to move venues to more suitable locations. If the venue's in a high deprivation area, allow it to move into the central business district. If a venue's close to a residential area, allow it to move to a more suitable location. If a venue's in a large, once Warriors style tavern type environment and wants to move to a new, smaller modern sports bar type environment, that should be something that council should be able to consider. So it was very much a harm minimisation tool. The focus wasn't in allowing venues to be restored following an event like a fire. It was really much a harm minimisation tool. And I think your policy should reflect that. I think we should be able to come to you on a case-by-case basis and say, this would actually be a better location from a harm minimisation point of view, even though we're moving within a gambling permitted area, you guys should be able to consider it case by case basis. If the case stacks up, why should we prohibit that?
Right. Thank you. And those harm minimisation aspects are relatively new as well.
Yeah, so they came into, the first stage of that came into effect on Gambling Free Day on the 1st of September. New requirement for us to have more comprehensive training. So effectively it takes 3 hours now to go through our training, compulsory role play sessions, compulsory videos or meetings with people that have suffered from gambling harm, giving their perspective, which is really, really good. And then from the 1st of December, the new rules in relation to ATM withdrawals and transactions and monitoring that come into play.
Last question. You make some pretty good, clear comments. Try not to load that sentence in. About conflicts of interest through you, Mr. Chair. Through you, Mr. Chair. In paragraph 74 refers to legal advice about conflict of interest. Can I just note that I would like those questions raised in the next part of the proceedings? Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Mayor
Thank
Paula.
you.
Yep, thank you. Just before you go, Jared, we've got Councillor Sarah online, and it was remiss of me at the start to not acknowledge our online attendees. So welcome, and please go ahead with your question.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Kia ora, Jared. In terms of expanding the relocation, the ability to relocate, would it be, for example, if you had a club, is it possible that someone could come and essentially buy the rights to those gambling machines, or another business take that over, so you end up with not just the venue moving, but I guess the machines moving, but potentially with a different operator?
Yeah, so there would be there's no requirement for it to be the same operator. There is a legal requirement with relocations that the existing operator must consent to the relocation. But what I'm suggesting is that you would have a discretionary basis and a case-by-case basis. So the case would come to you, you might even ask for public submissions on it, you'd have a hearing on it, and you'd consider whether the merits stack up. And from my point of view, it doesn't really matter who owned it. The key is harm minimisation. If the news site's better from a harm minimisation point of view, it should go ahead, full stop.
Yeah. And thank you. And in terms of this kind of introducing this kind of policy, do you have examples of other metro, city councils that have done that?
Yes. I can't name them off the top of my head, but I could certainly give you a list of, say, at least 6 to a dozen councils that have a discretionary provision for this very, very reason. Bring it to us on a case-by-case basis. Let's put it out on public notification. Let's have a submission process and a hearing process. So happy to give you that information. I can't give it to you off the top of my head, sorry, but there's certainly many examples of it.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Jared, and thank you for your time this morning. I appreciate you making the effort to come in and submit in public.
Thank you.
Okay, can I welcome David Douglas? Good morning, David.
Morning.
Welcome to the chamber. Are you familiar with the process?
I think I came in a couple of years ago.
Oh, okay, all right. Well, you've got 10 minutes to speak to your submission. I would advise, if you're comfortable with it, leave a couple of minutes maybe at the end to field any questions that colleagues may have, just for clarity though.
Yep, absolutely fine.
Floor's all yours.
Cool, thank you. Look, on my behalf as chairman of Wanderers Sports Club, it's a very simple submission as per what I submitted in a few weeks ago. For us, the support that we receive through funding organisations and the TAB and the likes basically keep our lights on and allow us as a sporting club to be able to do what we want to do in the community, and that's to basically get as many people up and active, ideally playing football. But we do have other arms to our club now. We have a hockey arm to Wanderers Sports Club, which has grown up to about 6 teams now, and will grow in 2024 also. We also have a wheelchair, power chair football team as well, which operates under our umbrella. For those in the room that maybe don't quite know the inner workings of football in New Zealand, we're very much a sport that's funded from the grass up. Okay, so New Zealand football doesn't send down money from the top, unfortunately. So it really does fall on the clubs themselves to raise funds to grow the sport and to deliver football programs across not only its members but ideally into the wider community as well. So that brings its own challenges in the sense of, you know, we have to attract people in, but you also then don't want to hammer them with a huge entry fee or a huge registration fee to be able to play the sport that we all love. And that's where the funding organisations and so forth come to our aid in giving us funds to be able to deliver programs through qualified coaches. So as a sports club or as a football club, we operate Saturday morning junior football, of which we number around 230, 240 kids. That's been a significant increase this year. We expect more as the sport becomes more popular. We then operate into regional youth leagues through ages 12 to 17, and then we operate regionally and nationally from basically 17 upwards into senior football. When you come back down from senior football down into our youth programs, they all require basically club licensing, and that includes qualified coaches, obviously resources and infrastructure at certain levels, which all comes at a cost for us. Basically, before we kick a football, we're about $120,000, $130,000 where we have to find that straight away, because that covers ground hire, that covers entry fees, affiliation fees into our teams competing in those levels. Because we are, I guess, at one of those levels as a club, there's ourselves and Melville who operate at those highest levels. We operate that pathway for a 4-year-old to join our club and then potentially progress all the way through to play at the highest domestic competitions. So we're very unique in that respect. But the problems we have versus our Auckland counterparts is that we just don't have the numbers on the ground. So, for example, we have a youth academy footballer who plays in regional leagues. Currently, we try to keep those costs down. We make very little money off a $750 registration fee that person pays. In Auckland, the equivalent would sit somewhere around $2,500 for the same player in Auckland. But we're talking with our junior membership and youth membership of maybe 300 players versus clubs in Auckland that sit at 2,000-3,000 members. So you can see that if you have a small increase in a playing fee, it can generate more income for that club. We just don't have the numbers to be able to sustain that. If we were to increase our playing cost by $10, it just doesn't have an effect to be able to help us deliver the programs that we need to. And as I've said before, because the sport is funded from the grassroots up, we need to, it's our responsibility as a club, and we work very hard on it, to keep fees and so forth, people coming into the sport, as low as possible, because that's our obligation to the community, is to try and get as many people playing football as we can. And we don't, as I said before, we don't want to sting people to say, hey, come and play our sport, it's brilliant, you get all this, but it's going to cost you $300 or $500. And that, unfortunately, would be the reality if we didn't have the generous support that we get from our funding organisations. I've been in football all my life. I was playing at the highest level when we used to have alcohol and tobacco sponsorship, and that was obviously great for those, I guess, for want of a better word, lesser sports at the time, the footballs, the softballs and so forth. When that was all removed, we were advised, don't worry, we'll have government funding that will come and help that in the way of smoke-free sponsorship, and that lasted about 6-9 months. and then it was left to us as clubs to then go and find money. Like everyone, we fight for the discretionary dollar. Everyone in here knows that everyone's feeling a pinch at the moment. Families, businesses, everything. So for us to go and find the money if the funding was unavailable it's just unrealistic. We just wouldn't be able to run the programs that we do. We wouldn't be able to offer the pathways that we can for our aspiring footballers, and it's not all about them, it's about growing the sport as well. And as we know, an aspiring footballer could be someone that develops really quickly, someone that develops really, really late. And we pride ourselves as a club to be able to offer that pathway for anyone. But unfortunately it comes at a cost, and the costs keep increasing for us. And as I say, it's we have to, and we have in the past, increased our subscription fees, but we try to keep that as low as possible, because ultimately for us, we as a sports club want to get as many people playing, not only football, be it hockey, be it power chair. We just want people up and active. But without the support that we get from our funding organisations, it would just be too hard. And you would end up in a situation whereby, football would become basically uneconomical for someone to play at sort of any level, really, which would be incredibly disappointing. And I'm sure everyone sitting in the room wouldn't want that to happen, for someone not to be able to access sport at any level because of cost. So yeah, that's me.
Great, turn it off. Thank you, David. I can't see any requests for any questions around the room, so thank you for your submission. Thank you for taking the time.
No
Appreciate
problems.
it.
Thank you.
Yep. Ainsley. Next we have Ainsley Leslie. Welcome, Ainsley.
Hi, thank you.
Welcome. Now, are you familiar with the process here?
Well, from what I've just listened to.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. The only difference, so you only have 5 minutes.
Yep, no, that's absolutely fine. That's plenty for me.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. Floor
I'm
is yours.
Ainsley, and I'm just a mum who helps a number of clubs and organisations around our city. Rugby clubs, hockey, cricket, tennis, various schools. And I'm not one for public speaking, so for me to be here today shows just how strongly I feel about putting a sinking lid on these gaming machines in Hamilton, and how detrimental it could be to our society. I mean, don't get me wrong, I totally get why you want to put a sinking lid on these pokies and gaming machines, but to eliminate these vices is only going to turn people to online gambling, and we've all, it's all read about. As Jared alluded to, there's a number of strict controls within the platforms there now. I've witnessed that myself, and I think that's a good way of helping to control this issue. At least these pokie machines give funding back to societies, clubs, schools, and other non-for-profit entities in our city. It's something positive. And what I'm here for is to stress and reinforce that I'd hate to see what would happen to many of these clubs and entities if they couldn't access these funds. We've just heard it from Wanderers. I know many clubs shouldn't be reliant on this revenue stream, but in reality they are. In order to complete major capital projects and just simply for some to survive. The requests, I find, are needs rather than wants. My question back to Council is, if you restrict this revenue stream, what is out there to provide monetary assistance to help these clubs out there? If you don't, then there's unfortunately going to be a whole lot of derelict buildings, facilities that are not going to be visually appealing to our city. To have fully functioning sports facilities, we just ran Waikato Seniors big national tournament here earlier in April. The flow-on effect to the city is fundamental: accommodation spend, food spend, visiting attractions, etc. And we're just not going to get that kind of participation or those people coming through if we don't invest in our, or have access to that funding for these clubs and whatnot. Downgraded facilities, you're not going to attract your members, and sponsorship, so that's going to affect the revenue stream coming into these clubs. Yeah, so really that's me. It's all been reiterated by Jared and Wanderers there. But yeah, I'm just here to say, hey, please help the clubs. Yeah, and look at the bigger picture, really. Yeah, we need this help to keep functioning in the community. Thank you.
Thank you, Ainsley. So just for clarification, you're saying that you're happy with the capped number at 376? You don't want to...
Well, yeah, I don't want to see a sinking lid on the gaming machines. Yeah, capped is, yeah, if that's the only alternative, yeah.
Okay, great. I don't see any other questions from any of my colleagues, so thank you very much for taking the time to come in today. We really appreciate it.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Right, now next on the list is someone who's not too unfamiliar to all of us, Mr. Matthew Cooper and Amy Marfell. Well, welcome, Matthew. Or
Thank
Matt.
you.
Do you prefer to be called Matthew or Matt?
Anything
Okay.
will be fine, as long as it's the right person.
Yeah. Not the names we used to call you on the rugby field. No.
Well, firstly, Chairperson and Councillor Mark, councillors, thank you very much for the opportunity. Kia ora koutou, ko Matthew Cooper toki ingoa, ko Amy Marfell, GM for Sport Waikato, and tēnā koutou katoa, just to acknowledge you all here today. I'll take the submission as read. I just want to focus on the Sport Waikato in terms of our two recommendations before I just say a couple of comments, then open it up for questions. The removal of the current sinking lid policy, Sport Waikato supports the following changes to the current policy. The removal of the current sinking lid policy and replaced with a capped policy at the current number of venues and gaming machines operating throughout Hamilton City. 24 venues, 376 gaming machines. Reducing gaming machine numbers does not reduce gambling expenditure, and only, as mentioned by our previous speaker, only accelerates a migration to online gambling and therefore less money in our community. My second point is the expansion of the current venue relocation provisions, allowing council to consider relocation applications on a case-by-case basis within gambling permitted areas of Hamilton City. Current policy restrictions make it difficult for relocations to occur, and council should consider relocations as a positive move, which can also have some harm minimisation benefits if a venue can relocate from high deprivation areas to low deprivation areas. Council, I wanted to stress and need to reinforce the importance of Class 4 gaming to the sport and recreation sector in Hamilton City and beyond our borders, and the significant and unplanned gap that removing this money from our city's communities would leave. Both Sport Waikato and Hamilton City Council will need to be prepared to find ways to fill this gap, as we're the two likely agencies that would be looking for an answer, or they'll be looking for an answer. We have to have a plan. Hamilton City Council also has the potential to get significant and much needed sport and recreation infrastructure underway by partnering alongside gaming trusts, other funding and other funding channels. Sport Waikato is your leverage partner in activating this. That's what we do. The likes of Trust Waikato, Sport New Zealand, lotteries, Ministry of Education and neighbouring TAs. Simply, Council, the gap in the supply is too great not to have Class 4 gaming as a partner in the provision of sport and recreation in Hamilton City. And Council, that's our submission. Thank you. I've just finished, Mr. Chair.
Oh, have you? Oh, okay, sorry. Sorry. Right, well, that was good. Mayor Southgate.
Thank you. Your submission, of course, was set out very well. In terms of, you had some figures around the amount of money that goes into clubs.
Yeah.
It would be hard, but what kind of proportion of the overall money that funds clubs do you think would come from gambling? We're talking, is it a percentage? I didn't see it. Maybe I didn't read hard enough.
It's not in there because we wouldn't have it for every club. Every club would be different. Some would be more reliant on it than others, and that would come down to the code's funding model.
Yeah.
So something like rugby or cricket is funded from a top-down mechanism, whereas other codes are funded bottom-up.
Right. of
So
course.
Class 4 plays a more significant role in some of those codes than it might, say, in a cricket or a rugby environment.
So when you're grassroots level club and you're trying to get local funding, that's where the bite will hit the most, you're saying?
Absolutely.
But with our RSOs as well, we know a lot of our RSOs do use gaming funding to supplement the funding that they get from other sources as well.
Does that data of who gets what from, you've got some, does it sit in one place or is it all over the place, that the
In
data?
terms of who gets what from gaming,
Yeah.
we don't have that data, but I imagine the Gaming Trust would absolutely have that data.
Yes.
Who you? Just, I shouldn't really ask that.
Granted.gov.nz sets it out on individual club basis.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Sorry to go back to our previous. Thank you.
Councillor Louise.
Thank you for your submission. There's just was a comment about, and you've said it in your submission about accelerating a migration to online gambling. I've sort of heard it a couple of times already this morning. I was just wondering if there was a report or a piece of research that backed that up, or.
The only bit of research in terms of whether it's factual right now is I know through COVID, councillor, there was a massive shift to online overseas gambling through COVID, through the COVID period, which was a great example of what would happen if we start restricting this opportunity, because the money was not going to our communities, the percentage of money.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I can't see any other. Oh yes, Councillor Wilson.
Thanks, Matt, for your presentation. I'm really interested in the argument and the concern about the gambling habit going off onto the internet.
Yeah.
Any really helpful data as to try to quantify the level of that occurring, and then to be able to project the sort of revenue decrease to local communities and sporting organisations?
Well, I mean, I'm not sure. Maybe I know I see another submitter. I'm not sure if he's spoken yet, but I know there's, with Martin, they might have more accurate data around that in terms of the actual industry itself. All I'd say is, on page 4, we talk about I think it was 6.3 million that came into Hamilton for one calendar year, and over a period of time up to 22 million, and then obviously that's a bigger Class 4 agency, and then the others. So all I'm saying is if we start sinking, and I suppose the real key of my conversation here this afternoon or this morning, councillor, is more what's our plan? Because if it starts to drop, we need a plan, because sport and recreation is going to suffer.
Right. Would it be fair, and I'd be interested in your comment, historically, I think this council's position was gambling was bad.
Yeah.
We wanted to be incredibly restrictive. We wanted a sinking lid to make it hard, and that was going to cure the problem. Is it your opinion, in fact, if that continues, the problem isn't disappearing, it's just going offline, and some of the debatable benefits that were occurring in the old model, including funding to grassroots, will dissipate and disappear?
Yeah, I don't think your strategy is going to fix the problem, councillor.
Okay, thank you.
Just to the second part of your question, if I can, around reliance in terms of that local sector, a similar but different example we've had is the old Kiwi Sport model. So the Sport New Zealand Kiwi Sport funding that a lot of clubs and codes were reliant on. When the government changed the guidelines for that, we had a number of clubs and codes not able to operate in the same ways that they can, and some not able to operate at all. So there was a significant unrest within the system because a quite decent chunk of money had been removed. So the same sorts of things would happen to a greater degree because there's more money in the gambling system. If a change was to happen, that meant that funding was restricted.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. No one online, so thank you for your submission this morning. Appreciate you taking the time to come in and present it. Yeah,
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor.
Enjoy the rest of your day. So introduce Martin and then Ewan. Now, next guest in the chamber is Mr. Martin Bradley. Now, I'm going to ask Councillor Ewan to chair this part of the meeting just because I have a potential conflict of interest. So Ewan's going to take over. While there's no voting, it's not absolutely essential, but I just feel it'll be better if I sit this one out.
Well, good morning.
Good morning.
And welcome.
Thank you.
You've
I have a
presented
PowerPoint presentation as well.
Excellent. Just a reminder, so to cover the salient points and leave as much time as you can for questions.
Sure.
Thank you. You've got the floor.
Can I get my presentation up on the
Yep.
screen?
It is on its way. We won't start the time until we do that. How's that?
Thank you. Before I address you in respect of my presentation, I just want to address that issue that, Councillor, that you asked the last speaker about the migration to online gaming. I have some statistics from Sky City Casino's online casino, and in 2020 their gaming revenue was 10.2 million, and with the advent of COVID it climbed to 27.9 million. Another statistic that I'm aware of is that I think it was last year Kiwibank provided some information that suggested that their clients spend $30 million a month on online gaming sites. I think we all know that Kiwibank's share of the market is probably less than 10%. So if you extrapolate those numbers out, it's quite a big problem, the online space. And of course, none of the money is returned to New Zealand in the form of community grants, and the government doesn't get any tax or fees or levies on that money either. So I just wanted to clear that up before I got started. I want to talk about four things today. The first one is who Grassroots Trust is, what we do in the community, harm minimisation, and finally your policy. The Grassroots Group is the biggest Class 4 operator in the North Island. We're also the largest operator in Hamilton City. We currently operate 223 gaming machines here, which amounts to 76% of the current market. We are the only Class 4 operator to ever be issued a 3-year gaming licence by the Department of Internal Affairs, demonstrating best practice and compliance. And our number one strategic priority is harm minimisation, and as you'll see later on in my presentation, we do take it very, very seriously. Last year we contributed almost, or returned almost 30 million to the community. Next page, please. So this year marks our 20th year of operation, and during that time we have returned 181 million to New Zealand communities. The grant funding to Hamilton City is, as Jared mentioned, significant, 8.5 million in 2022 and 9.6 million in 2021. Grassroots Trust itself, in the period ending August 2023, returned 5.6 million to the community, to 112 different sport, education and community groups. This next slide just highlights a few of the things that we do. In addition to the many sporting and community groups, we also fund significant events such as Balloons Over Waikato, the Hamilton Arts Festival. We've provided significant funding to the theatre, and Round the Bridges is another event that we have been funding for many, many years, and I'd venture to suggest that those events or those facilities wouldn't be able to proceed in their current form without this funding. We're also proud to support St John's. As a group in the last financial year, Grassroots Trust granted money to enable the purchase of 7 ambulances around the country. And so if these funds dry up, these sort of essential services will be affected as well. Next slide, please. So in our submission, the distribution of Class 4 gaming funds is efficient and effective. It makes a positive difference to many community organisations who had struggled to survive without this funding. I think that's the message that you're hearing from other submitters today. And nationally, the Class 4 gaming returns $300 million to the community and a further 50 from clubs. And the government are also a big recipient. They receive around 33% of the gaming machine proceeds in taxes and duties, and also receive a problem gambling levy. Next slide, please. Harm prevention and minimisation, as we say, is our key strategic priority. The reality, however, despite what some others will try and tell you, is that the incidence of problem gambling in New Zealand is incredibly low, and it is 0.2% of the adult population, and it has been at that level for a number of years, regardless of sinking lid policies. The industry is committed to minimising harm, and you heard Jared talk about the new regulations that are coming in. We operate under the Gambling Act, and the regulations are long and are strict with significant penalties. We treat it very seriously. Each year, the Ministry of Health receives over $20 million through the problem gambling levy. But as I say, the statistics are so low that the government and the Ministry of Health can't spend the $20 million. Currently, they have an account with nearly $30 million in it, which is unspent problem gambling levy funds. Grassroots is also installing facial recognition technology, which is the standout technology to support our harm minimisation programs. The last of our Hamilton City venues will be completed this week, which will effectively mean, given the scale of our operation in Hamilton City, that 76% of the venues in Hamilton City will have the best technology to provide against problem gambling. There are also other tools such as exclusive and multi-venue exclusion order programs which are in place. There are only 87 individuals that have excluded themselves in Hamilton, so the problem gambling rate is very low in the city. And there is a national database of excluded gamblers that is presided over by the Salvation Army. The sinking lid policies, as you've heard from previous speakers, are ineffective. The risk, as we've heard from others, is that it will push people online, where all the profits, as I said before, go offshore, and there's no community benefit. We are supporting the cap policy, as other submitters have, at 24 venues and 376 machines. We also support an extension of the relocation policy. I think Jared submitted to you in great detail the benefits of widening the scope of the relocation policy, and I would endorse his comments on that. Grassroots is wanting Council to take a more partnered approach to Class 4 gambling. We would like to partner with the Council so that the infrastructure and community facilities in the area can be improved and extended, as there will be significant health benefits for all if that's achievable. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you for your presentation. I have Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for your presentation. I was just wanting to clarify, well, there was around 87 or something like that, people who have self-declared themselves as problem gamblers, but there would be more than that in terms of people who have problem gambling issues, who haven't declared themselves. Is that, you would acknowledge that?
Well, I don't have the statistics. I would presume that's accurate, but the Salvation Army provide us with the information, and that's the only information we have to go on.
Okay, thank you. And, okay. No, that's all at this stage. Thank you, Chair.
Mayor Paula.
Thank you. I only half heard the comment. I was trying to clarify it with Kesh about unspent Ministry of Health levies. Could you?
Yes, they operate and I can't quite recall the name of the account, but there is, each year it grows. So it's in excess of 20 million and heading towards 30 million of unspent problem gambling levy. As an industry, we've been trying to get the Department of Internal Affairs to use some of that money to ensure that all venues have facial recognition technology, but that's not something that they're prepared to embrace at this point, despite the fact that they run a surplus in that account.
Okay. Last question is relating to the problem gambling, off the tail of Sarah's question. In any countries across the world, are there examples of a lower rate of problem gambling as a result of different policy, or I mean, is there any best practice in that regard, or?
Well, we would like to think that we operate best practice here, and there's not much room to manoeuvre between 0.2 of the population and something lower, so we would have to think that we're doing everything that we can, I would have thought. I'm not aware of any data that would support a lower problem gambling rate anywhere else in the world.
I'm interested in that. I mean, there'll be a few countries where it was completely illegal, but there'll be some, not many.
That doesn't mean it doesn't happen, though.
That's right, that's right. So, yeah, no, just interested. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We'll swap over chairs, but meanwhile, the next speaker will be Rebecca and Richard Wall.
Okay, so Richard?
Yes.
Yep. You familiar with the process here?
Vaguely, yeah. Yes.
Okay, so being an association, you have 10 minutes. I would encourage you to, if you want to leave a couple of minutes at the end of your presentation for any questions that council may be seeking just for clarification. So, but other than that, floor is yours.
Thank you. So, kia ora. My name is Dr. Richard Wall. I'm one of the medical officers of health with the Waikato Public Health Service, which is part of Te Whatuora. Yes, I'm here today. I'd like to commend you on the harm minimisation focus that you've got in the current policy, or Class 4 gambling policy, with the sinking lid, and really here to support you in maintaining that, as we see it as the best means of reducing gambling harm or gambling related harm in Hamilton. In terms of the options, we support option 2, that we think it can be further strengthened by not permitting mergers or relocations to occur, and we see that as a true sinking lid policy that those wouldn't be allowed to occur. And we support option 1 in regards to the TAB venues policy. I want to speak to the harm gambling, that's caused by gambling, because obviously that's the reason that I'm here today, to support the sinking lid. Gambling harm can vary significantly in its severity, right from some minor disagreements at home through psychological, emotional stress, through to real major financial problems or interpersonal difficulties that can affect home life and work and relationships. So a public health approach has to consider that whole breadth of harm, not just that severe end of the harm. And of course, harm from gambling doesn't just affect the gambler themselves, it also affects those people who are close to them and around them, so people in their family and in their workplace and their friends and the wider community. And there's evidence that shows that around 7 other people can be affected by somebody experiencing severe gambling harm. And those other people can, the harm that they experience can be quite severe, of course, things like neglect of children, family violence and workplace fraud. The harm from gambling is thought to be underreported, and that's presumably partly because of the stigma and shame associated with it, that people don't tend to come forward and talk about it. It's often hidden, even from people's own families. And that can make it really difficult to collect data and say how much the harm is within Hamilton. There's Ministry of Health data looking at the number of people who seek help from treatment services, and for the 21 to 22 year, that was 571 people. And that number in itself is not insignificant, but it will be a significant undercount of the true level of harm. That the harm will be much more than that because of the fact that people keep it hidden and they don't report it. And it requires, to seek treatment requires you to acknowledge that there's a problem and to go out and seek treatment, which is quite a significant thing for people to do. And of course, it's unlikely to pick up those people who are close to the gambler and are harmed in that way. So we rely on national surveys to look at what is the level of harm across the country, and that if you look at the much broader definition of harm that I've described, that full continuum, then it tends to be around 5% of the adult population experience gambling harm. But about 1 in 5 adults have been affected at some time or by either their own or by the gambling of others, so it's not an insignificant number. In medicine, you can compare the burden of harms from one disease to other types of diseases by looking both at the severity of the harm and also the number of people affected. And when you do that for gambling, the harm caused by gambling is over twice that of the harm caused by common health conditions such as diabetes and osteoarthritis. And I think that's a really important thing to consider, because these are major medical problems that New Zealand faces, these two diseases, and yet it's likely that we know people with these diseases, but the harm from gambling is much more significant than them. Now, I've been talking about the harm from all forms of gambling, but pokies or electronic gaming machines are generally considered to be the most harmful form of gambling. And over half of those who do seek help for their gambling report Class 4 gambling as their major gambling mode. And the machines are designed in such a way that they are addictive in the way that the sounds and the graphics, the intermittent wins, and the continuous nature of them have been able to play multiple games in quick succession. Unfortunately, the harm from gambling isn't spread across the whole population either. The risks are greater for some groups than for other groups, and I just want to touch on the harm for those who are living in low socioeconomic areas. That the harm for them is much more significant than those living in less deprived areas. And we know that throughout the country that there's Class 4 gambling venues are disproportionately placed in those low socioeconomic or high deprivation areas. And in Hamilton, that's the case as well, with 83% of gambling venues located in medium, high and very high deprivation areas. So I think it's really important to do as much as we can to try and address the harm, and we see that a sinking lid policy is the best means at council's disposal to try and address that harm. From a public health point of view, we see restricting access to a product leads to reduced use of that product, and we work in that area in all sorts of different things. So you think of tobacco and gambling, you try and restrict access to those products in various ways, and it reduces use. And it's the same for gambling, and a sinking lid is a means of doing that over time. There is evidence, and there's a good meta-analysis that took data from quite a number of studies and pulled it together to get more meaningful data, and that showed a really statistically meaningful relationship between the prevalence of problem gambling and the density of pokie machines per capita. And that really supports the use of a sinking lid, that reducing the density or number of machines is likely to reduce harm. Look, I just want to talk briefly as well about concerns about community funding. I know that there's always concerns that sinking lids might lead to a reduction in community funding, and I recognise that a lot of organisations that do great work do get funds from gaming machine grants. But our position is very much that the harm caused by pokie machines outweighs the benefits from those grants, and we see it as not acceptable to cause harm to one vulnerable sector of society in order to benefit another group. The funds from pokie machines, as I've said, tends to be coming from those people in our community who can least afford it. The Class 4 gambling expenditure is disproportionately derived from the most deprived areas in New Zealand, with people in the most deprived areas spending up to 3 times what people in the least deprived areas spend. While the funds are predominantly coming from these deprived areas, they're not necessarily going back to those same people in socioeconomic deprivation. Yes, in conclusion, I just say that Te Whatuora Waikato, we support your sinking lid policy for Class 4 gambling. We encourage you to strengthen this as per option 2, to not allow mergers and relocations. And I'll leave it there for questions. Thanks.
That's great. Thank you for your submission, Richard. I can see there's a few people would like to just seek clarification. I'll start with Councillor Wilson first.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Thanks, Doctor. I have three quick questions. Could you, over, say, the last 5 years, show any correlation between the numbers that are seeking health as a result of gambling?
The people seeking health is, as I've said, not particularly meaningful because it doesn't pick up the full extent of harm, and so I don't know how that number's moved over the last 2 years.
So you're not aware at all if as a result of the sinking lid?
It would not be a useful number to look at.
Right. But you can't turn to any figure that shows that the current sinking lid policy is working.
I think it's, as I've said, it's really difficult to get data on that. So I can't for Hamilton say that. But there, as I say, there is evidence that that there's this relationship between problem gambling and density of machines. And
yes, but other jurisdictions have other policies. What I'm trying to test is whether or not our current policy is having any statistical, any measurable benefit.
To achieve that, you would have to do significant surveys on your population.
On that point, it goes to my third question. I'll come back to my second one very quickly. This assertion that there's unspent funds within the Ministry of Health as generated as part of a levy, why is that, and why isn't some of those funds doing the research you feel you need?
You're asking the wrong person. I don't work for the Ministry of Health.
Right. But you're not aware of why the funds would be...
It's not an area that I work in, I'm sorry. I work for Te Whatuora.
The final comment is you spoke about the proximity, and particularly in low economic areas. Why would you then be against the ability to move away from those lower economic areas into other parts of the city?
I think because it would be more beneficial for those the numbers just to drop and to lose those machines rather than move them to a different area. And I don't think that it's likely that people are going to be moving there voluntarily when the money and the spend is in those low or high dep areas. And so, you know, they're going to move potentially because there's a reason that they have to move, and it would be better from a public health perspective for those machines to be removed.
And aren't people just, if they're not going to use the local pokies, you have no comments on online gambling and the negative, are you not driving more people online?
I haven't made comment on online gambling because I think it's a separate issue, and obviously online gambling is a significant issue, but I don't think it pertains to this particularly because there's no evidence to show that it's going to move to online gambling. It might do, but I don't think that is a reason to do something that we know works and is going to be helpful in terms of something that does cause harm on the off chance that it does something else. And in fact, in COVID, which I guess is the best kind of thing we've got lately, is what happens when there isn't access to these machines. Then most people, there was, didn't gamble, or there wasn't a significant move to online gambling, or they gambled the same amount or less.
Right, and how do you know that?
Because surveys were done.
Right.
Yeah, over that time.
So
there was a proportion
so
who increased their gambling and online gambling.
So there's been surveys done on that, but there's been no surveys to show whether or not the steps or the policies of this council have made any difference in the last 5 years.
Yeah, I'm not talking about surveys in Hamilton. I'm talking about national surveys. And
but you recognise this is a Hamilton policy,
I
not
do
a
recognise the
national
Hamilton
policy.
but as I say,
we're
you
just
would need
starting
to
to get a little off
undertake that
topic.
work.
So, excuse me. Sorry, we're just getting a little. We'll call it there.
Okay, thanks, Chair.
Councillor Ewan. Yeah. Mayor Paula, bearing in mind that we've gone over time, but
Thank you.
and we are looking for clarification.
I'll just try and go to a different thing. Harm, you said harm caused is more than twice, and you gave an example of osteoarthritis as one example, and there is a cited reference dated 2018 in your stuff. Actually, there was only one in 2020, and that was to do with retail spend. All the health-related ones seem to be much earlier than that. Is there nothing more recent?
That's the most recent that I'm aware of.
Oh, okay.
Of that particular type of study.
Yeah, just all of the ones you listed. The only recent one was 2020, and that was related to retail spend from the New Zealand Economic Institute. Just a question, in terms of harm caused by gaming, and we accept that there is, versus harm caused by not engaging in physical activity like such as sport. Has anything ever been done about the correlation? I know you said, I get your philosophical debate about not reducing harm, so you create another type of harm. But in terms of getting obesity levels down, children into sport, those kind of things, is there any evidence by anyone in terms of the relativity of those two harms? Because you're talking about a social and emotional
I guess you're asking
harm.
sort of similar to the burden of harm study that we referred to in regards to diabetes and osteoarthritis. Did they also compare obesity or physical activity? And I'm not aware that they did. No.
Yeah, I'm just wondering where I could find an understanding about that, because inactivity is a massive, massive impost on the health system and cost, isn't it? And I just don't see, it's like they're parallel and apart, and I just don't see all the data. Any ideas where I could go for that?
I don't, sorry. I mean, there'll be a lot of information about the harm from obesity and lack of physical activity, but not a comparison as such.
Sure, thank you. And some of the cited references actually have online gambling included in the overall study, don't they? So they were a combination of pokies and online gambling. Some of the other cited references, when I read some of them, I don't read them all word for word, I will tell you that.
Possibly I would have to review my reference list.
And harm, in your view, is due to the loss of income into a household and stress and things like that. It's not the actual sitting at gaming machines for hours and hours, is it?
As I say,
the
that
loss of money.
harm can be broad, and I guess if somebody is sitting for hours and hours at a gaming machine, they're not, doing other things, and that is going to be causing them harm.
Yeah, you've got to wonder about the future cost of Technec, don't you? for non-gambling gaming. No, that's cool. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Mayor Paula. Just sort of, I'm going to set a limit of 2 questions per person from now, because I want to get to morning tea. So, and we've gone over time. Councillor Kesh. Councillor Hutt. Sorry, I was looking at Kesh.
I've only got one question. So
Oh, good.
There you go.
Okay. Yeah.
I would never. Thank you for your submission. I just noted in your written submission you mentioned gambling harm at the community level can impact directly through crime and disorder. I was wondering if you wanted to just elaborate on how those two things tie in together.
I mean, I can't give you specific examples, but through financial difficulty, it can lead to crime.
Is there any direct like you mentioned before about fraud, workplace fraud? Is there any studies that directly link that together, or is that a general comment on addiction in this way?
I think it's a general comment on addiction in this way.
Okay, cool.
Thank you, Councillor Hutt. Councillor Kesh.
Thank you. I had a list, but I'll try and make it two. Coming back to something the Mayor talked about, in the studies and in your submission, you talk about gambling harm, and a lot of your references with those studies includes online as well as physical gambling. So, I mean, how accurate?
Yeah, so
is your
I mean,
position?
the studies on harm are generally, a lot of them, as you say, they talk about gambling harm overall. They're not specific for poker machines. And I guess my point is that poker machines are widely considered one of the most harmful forms of gambling, as I talked about, because it's what people who seek help is their primary concern that they've been gambling on, and the way the machines are, that sort of continuous form of gambling leads to more harm than other types of gambling. And I guess online gambling would be similar in that respect.
So in your professional opinion, does that mean we have a whole group of people in the community we don't even know have issues with gambling who are online gamblers?
Yeah, I mean, I haven't looked specifically into online gambling for this because it's not about online gambling, but I guess that's likely. But equally, there's a large group of people that we don't know about who are harmed from poker machines.
Am I allowed one more question? I just had one with the sport and active lifestyles, if that's okay. Sorry, my second question, I should have not asked that one. Your role in National Public Health Service, so does it cover sport and active lifestyles and the promotion of physical activity? And how do you encourage more of that, knowing that codes are quite reliant on funding from gambling?
Look, so the National Public Health Service does work in physical activity and so forth. That's not an area that I specifically work with, and within that there's health promotion teams who work in those areas. Yes, I'm not denying the fact that funding is a useful thing for these. What I'm saying is that there needs to be other forms of funding, and that we shouldn't continue doing nothing, or that we should do our best to reduce harm from gambling, and not use that as an excuse to continue.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Kesh. I'll go to my online, or go to our online colleagues now. I think it was Councillor Thompson was up first. Yep.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you so much for your presentation. I was just interested in the online versus electronic gaming machine, I guess, question is, I think it's going to be of a lot of interest. Is it possible for you to send through any information that you do have about whether there is any evidence or not of the I guess decreasing the availability of these gaming machines, then leading to an increase on online gambling?
As I say, I'm not aware of any evidence that suggests that a sinking lid is going to lead to online gambling. I can, as I say, there've been some surveys done over COVID. I can send you those links. But they're slightly different. I guess they're talking about what happened during a COVID period. I think there's a lot of unknown about it, and I guess my point is that that we do know of the harm from Class 4 gambling, and that we should be doing everything we can to address that and not hold off doing that because of a theoretical thing that has not been shown to be the case.
Thank you.
Happy to send you.
Just a reminder, we're seeking clarification around the report, so the submission. So, Councillor Jeff.
Yeah, thanks, Chair Mark. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Thank you. Look, thanks for your submission. Just in regards to the online gambling side, I think I heard you say that during COVID, online gambling didn't increase, and that you have surveys to prove that. I think the gentleman from Grassroots Trust, I think, cited a Sky City report which said, I think, that their online gambling during COVID rose from 10 million to something like 27 or 29 million.
Yeah, sorry, so I should clarify, I guess, that I didn't mean to say, if that's what I said, that online gambling didn't increase, but to say that most people gambled the same amount or less. So if people who are gamblers who might not have been online gamblers, then it didn't mean that they all suddenly switched to online gambling and started gambling. But certainly there would have been some who did that, and I respect that the online gambling would have gone up.
Thank you for the clarification. The other thing was, I think I heard you just say that online gambling is less serious than pokie machines.
No, I also didn't mean to say that, if that's what you took from it. It's something that I don't have the information on to say one's more serious than the other. I think they both have similar issues, and that they are continuous forms of gambling, and so certainly online gambling is of concern. I don't want that to weaken your stance on something else that we know is of concern, and being Class 4 gambling. Yeah.
Thanks for the clarifications. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Jeff. Councillor Hart, if you mention online, I'm going to come down hard on you.
No, but it wasn't a question, it was a point of clarification.
Go.
Because there were comments made by other councillors around the references in the submission having both online gambling and pokies in the same studies. Looking through all of the references. No, but can I clarify?
Yep. Yeah.
But we're not debating today. I'm not trying to debate this, I'm just trying to clarify.
We'll save that for another time.
Okay.
Yep. Right. Thank you for your submission today. We appreciate your time. Going to call a morning tea break now. We will come back at 11:05. Thank you. expect that to be so loud. Sorry about that. Welcome back, everyone. Thank you for indulging us with a morning tea break. Right, we'll continue on with submissions, and now we have Chris from the Cook. Welcome, Chris. You're familiar with the process here? Yep. Okay, all right. Okay, floor is yours.
It's all right.
Yeah, you're going, yep.
While I'm obviously from the Cook, I'm also here as my role as the branch president of the Waikato branch for Hospitality New Zealand. So I'm speaking on behalf of that organisation as well as my own vested interests. Doesn't change anything I'm about to say. So I'm here and I'm speaking to the different parts of the Class 4 gaming policy in Hamilton. Firstly, the sinking lid versus a cap, and I think the policy should be moved to a cap, because effectively a cap is a sinking lid with our rapidly growing population in Hamilton anyway. If we have a limit of how many machines and sites we have in Hamilton, and our population keeps growing at the rate it's going, which is fantastic, that is effectively a cap. And we have, I guess, what we started, we're about 180,000 people in Hamilton City at the moment. When the sinking lid came up for review in 2018, our population was 168,000. So already, if there was no reduction in sites, there would be 12,000 more people for the same amount of supply in that space. So simple maths, population up, number of machines is down. The second part, which goes hand in hand, is the relocations policy. And I urge Council to reconsider their stance on that at the moment, because the way things are at the moment, it basically enables a cluster model which condenses gaming. It forces competitive style behaviours between gaming outlets, and puts those, it basically takes all control out of the council's hands with regards to planning. I think a far more holistic approach, saying we want the ability through our planning guys with council to be able to say we want a limited amount of Class 4 gaming in each area, obviously listening to local boards and local representation, but not having the ability at the moment, to you could put more Class 4 gaming into Norton, which wouldn't suit that area. But when we're opening up places like Peacocks, and if there's a new operation going over there in a town centre, at the moment there's no way of servicing that area. So that control should go back to council through planning and having relocations enabled under the policy. Now, you will have heard a lot about, from very, very clever people, about Class 4 gaming, its pluses and minuses. In my perspective, and Hospitality New Zealand's perspective, is we're fortunate to have a pretty well balanced gaming model in New Zealand. The proceeds can contribute significantly to the benefits of the community at large, and that's borne out from data from other submitters as well. We're incredibly heavily regulated already in that space by central government, and adding another layer of controls through sinking lids and no relocations, it's simply not warranted, in my opinion. The new regulations come into effect on the 1st of December for Class 4 gaming operations, which bring it under, we're incorporating facial recognition technology. We are required now if someone uses an ATM machine in a Class 4 gaming venue, if they use it twice, we have to intervene with that person and ask them if they're okay. A whole lot of privacy issues going on there, but that's the new regulation. We have to sweep our gaming rooms by that, go into our gaming rooms and monitor who's in there 3 times every hour, no closer than 15 minutes apart. And if we find someone who's been in there for 3 hours or more, we have to intervene and offer them support. That's not a voluntary policy anymore. That's regulation. So a huge amount of change in that space from an operational point of view to mitigate these harms or potential harms from people going out and spending their time and their money by their own choice. The controls are there is the big part of our submission. They're already there. So putting more onerous conditions as we have got at the moment with no relocations, which takes control away from council, and a sinking lid, which actually creates more demand because there's less supply, it's not the way to go. And that's the crux of my submission today.
Great, thank you, Chris. Appreciate you coming in and submitting. I don't see any requests for questions. Oh, sorry, I forgot to look online. Councillor Sarah, would you like to ask a question on clarification?
Yeah. Yes, thanks, Chair, and thanks, Chris. I just wanted to clarify what you were referring to when you're talking about the inability to relocate causing clusters and competition. If you could elaborate on that, that would be helpful.
We've already got the cluster effect in place, is what I'm saying. If you look at the areas that you've got at the moment, you've got concentrations in some areas of gaming machines. It would be, and we can't do anything about that because they're existing use. If you had a relocations policy, you could diminish that effect.
Okay, yeah, understood. So, and the other question, clarification, you talked about the use of the requirement to use facial recognition technology and sweep the rooms and things. Does that apply to all venues with Class 4 gambling machines?
Every single one of them.
Yeah. All right, thank you.
Great. Thanks, Councillor Sarah. Thanks, Chris, again for coming in. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next submitter I'd like to call up is Terry Booth, Waikato Golf Association. Welcome, Terry.
Thank you, Chairman.
You're familiar with the process here, Terry?
Sorry?
You're familiar with the process?
I am, thank you,
Yep,
yes.
Okay, all right.
And thank you. I have a PowerPoint presentation that I'd like to
yes, you do.
present to you this morning as well.
Yep, awesome.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to give a snapshot, is what I'm going to call it, of what we do at Waikato Golf, what our achievements have been, and indeed what our achievements we would like to achieve going forward. We haven't been able to achieve what we have to date and won't be able to achieve what we want to do going forward if we didn't continue with the support that we get from the gaming trusts here in the mighty Waikato, namely the Grassroots Trust and the Lion Foundation. So I just want to cover that with you. Just there, as you see on the administration side of things, Waikato Golf cover a large geographical area from Coromandel up north right through down through the Waikato and down into the Tamanui and the King Country there. So combined, we look after 42 golf clubs. We have 13,043 members made up of, as you can see there, men, women, junior boys and junior girls. There's been exponential growth post-COVID with those numbers. As we came out of the second COVID lockdown, we had just over 11,000 members in total. So as you see there, as we sit here today with 13,000 members, there certainly has been exponential growth there. Next one, thank you. Futures Waikato is a big one I want to talk to you about today. This is an initiative that we came up with back in 2018. It took 2 years of talking to a number of our clubs here and surrounding the Hamilton area to form a golf club called Futures Waikato with partnership clubs involved as well, but we wanted to take ownership of the junior space to really grow the game for juniors in the Waikato. So we launched in February 2020, on the 12th of February. A week later along came the C word, of course, so there was a handbrake there. We had 19 members registered, so we had to wait until August of that year. It grew to numbers around just under 100, and then as we moved into the following year, of course, along came COVID again, so we had to have a handbrake there as well. So we pressed pause, but when we came out of the next round of COVID, we have seen, as I used the word earlier, exponential growth there. We now have 8 golf clubs as partnership clubs there: Hamilton, Morrinsville, Ngāwahia, Te Awa, Mutu, Horsham Downs, Hukanui, Ngānapiri and Huntly Golf Club. So the whole idea of this, of course, was to grow that space for juniors, give them the opportunity to participate in our great game, to include that we would offer them coaching after school. We would run in-school sessions, excuse me, as well, so that we could really get them to obviously get beside our game and grow it from there. So Futures Waikato was born. The next slide will show you that the growth that we have there now. We currently to date have 290 boys, 78 girls, a total of 368 junior Futures Waikato members. We have parent memberships, which we're absolutely doing handstands about. We have 94 parents now that have joined Futures Waikato as well, so that they can go along when their boys or girls go out onto these golf courses that have partnerships with us. They can go along as well and be part of the experience out on the golf course. The next slide will show you that we are offering coaching as well. Futures Waikato coaching programs have grown from an initial 3 sessions per term at 3 different golf clubs to 10 sessions at 4 locations now, being the Hamilton Golf Club, Ngāwahia Golf Club, Te Awa Mutu Golf Club, and our St Peter's Golf Academy out at Cambridge. We had 30 children attending coaching sessions in 2021. We now have the ability and available spots for 112 children to attend those coaching sessions. They certainly have grown, to say the least. Term 4 is already oversubscribed, and we are taking registrations already for 2024. So it certainly has resonated with the juniors there, and obviously the parents, for us to be offering these coaching sessions for their young fellas. The coaching sessions, as I say there, we are very, very fortunate here, to use the mighty Waikato again, that we have 7 NZ, that's New Zealand Professional Golf coaches here in the Waikato. We have taken the advantage to contract with them, Steve Hancock and Jaden Cleary at Hamilton, Craig Carrington from ProDrive, Duncan Bennett out at Ngāwahia, and Andrew Noble from ProDrive as well. So they are contracted to Futures Waikato to offer the coaching sessions after school at the various locations that you'll see as listed there. The next slide there, the coaching sessions. Always like to show you some photos. There's some young ones that are enjoying the coaching sessions there with Jaden and Stephen at the Hamilton Golf Club there. Super exciting. We do limit the numbers that we can have there, so it's only 8 children per session, so that we can do one-on-one coaching. And of course the big fill-up there, of course, is health and safety is a major concern there, of course, so we've limited the numbers that we can do in the coaching sessions there. Next slide, thank you. The target ages that we look at there are from 5 to 18. We are simply offering more opportunities in 2023 and going forward. In school sessions, we are now back actively involved in doing taster sessions in schools. Of course, as an outside contractor, we were not permitted to go into the schools during COVID lockdown, but of course now we are out of there post-COVID. We've reintroduced the initiative going into schools as well, and we've also been able to introduce a junior penance series, which will be shown on the next slide there. 12 teams participating, 5 players in each team, just at a slightly a level above just the taster sessions and that, so they are actually competing and playing on an actual golf course around the Waikato here. Next slide, thank you. She Loves Golf initiatives in the mighty Waikato. Wow. Don't we love this? Just one initiative I'd like to show you there. It's called Champagne Ladies. It does run at the Hamilton Golf Club. It hasn't been running through the winter, but it was prior to winter. We had Champagne Ladies there where they come along after work and they can go out for 3/4 of an hour if they want to play 1 hole, 2 holes, 3 holes or whatever they would like to play for 3/4 of an hour. Then the siren goes off and they come back in and they're presented with a nice platter of food and of course, as the word champagne would allude to, a nice little glass of bubbles as well. That at the Hamilton Golf Club has seen on average around 40 participants each night, and it runs for 6 weeks on a Wednesday night. Morans will also pick this up earlier in the year. They offered a $10 burger, whether it be a chicken burger or a beef burger, along with a glass of bubbles as well, and they've had upwards of over 80 women coming along in the little small town of Morrinsville. So some real growth there to get women into golf. Inter-school competitions, obviously we are heavily involved in the space in schools, as I alluded to earlier. We're in there doing taster sessions, but we also have some great little golfers coming through the system there, so we are offering champs days, team days, and also secondary school days as well. You can see some smiling faces there from some winners of those various competitions. Annually, we also run here a 2-day competition for participants from around the North Island to come to the Waikato Age Group Championships, under 14 girls, boys, under 16 girls, boys, under 19 girls and boys again participating. This is at a slightly higher level than Futures Waikato, of course, but we are catering into that space as well. Next slide, thank you. The community events that we're involved in, we were most fortunate to be able to bring in from America recently the big blow-up driving range that you see there, a 6-bay driving range, which allows us to run competitions at gala days, festivals, by using this driving range. Most recently, sadly, due to weather, we weren't able to run as many as we would have liked up around the Coromandel Peninsula, but in the new year we were up around the Whitianga, Whangamata and Coromandel regions running specific days using this inflatable driving range there, and there was certainly some great numbers on the days that we were able to run, but obviously inclement weather was with us as well. The next slide, thank you. We have most recently been invited into Hamilton Girls High to run in-school coaching events at Hamilton Girls High. We are delighted about that. We really are serious and passionate about growing the participation of girls and women in golf, so lovely to be invited into the Hamilton Girls High now to run various sessions in curriculum time as well. That particular one was our first one, which was actually done in lunchtime, but we're now actually doing in curriculum time as well. Slide there, we are obviously represent golf in the Waikato, so we do select girls and boys representative teams to go away. We do outfit them with their uniforms when they go away. Boys triangular, girls quadrangulars, junior boys interprovincial and junior girls interprovincials as well. So a space that we are heavily involved in for the perhaps the little bit more elite golfer. To summarise, I would suggest to you it is indisputable that physical activity, i.e. obviously I'm going to be biased there and suggest golf of course, has positive physical and mental health benefits for those participants in the wider community. It is therefore crucial for Waikato Golf to continue delivering our community programs going forward. Quite simply, I'd put it to you, we will not be able to do that if we don't continue to receive the ongoing support from the gaming trusts that we currently enjoy partnerships with. Thank you. Happy to answer any questions.
Well, all right. Thanks, Terry. I'd probably just quickly add that my mental health is always disrupted every time I play golf. So, yeah.
It does tend to do that to us, doesn't it?
Exactly, yeah, and yet we still keep playing. Any questions, colleagues? No, it was a very good submission. Thank you for taking the time out today to come in and submit. We really appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Thank you,
right.
Chairman.
Thank
you very much, everyone.
So we're just bringing, our next submitter is online. So. Kirsten, is it? Kirsty.
Dave.
Kirsten, good morning. Welcome to the chamber. Kay Christensen is who I've got next. Sorry, my apologies. Yeah.
That's okay.
No. What I'll do is I'll put my glasses on so I can read properly. So we've got Kay and...
Petey.
Okay, cool. Awesome. Thank you for coming in.
Hi, Christy.
Yeah.
All right. Well, firstly, thank you for the opportunity to speak this morning. Gosh, it's a lively debate, isn't it? It hasn't sort of changed significantly over the years that Council has been reviewing Class 4 and what to do with it. My name is Kay Christensen. I'm a policy advisor for the Problem Gambling Foundation based here in Hamilton. I'd like to introduce my colleague, Petey Waika. Now, Petey is the pōhiwa, or the public health worker for our organisation in this area, also based in Hamilton. And online, we have my colleague in Auckland, Christy King. Yeah, next slide, thank you. Okay. So look, just a little bit about our organisation. So the Problem Gambling Foundation trades as the PGF Group, and we work closely with our subsidiaries. So we've got Mapu Maya, who is our Pacific provider, and the Asian Family Services. So we work closely with them. We provide public health and clinical services across New Zealand, so our reach is as broad as our contract funding allows. I think it's really important for us to state that we are not an anti-gambling organisation. We are, however, opposed to the harm caused by gambling, and we will continue to advocate strongly for protections and consumer protections. So it's just important, because we are aware that not everyone has a problem with gambling. So Council had provided a number of options in this review, and the PGF Group strongly support option 2. We like that Council has a sinking lid policy. We would like Council to go further and introduce no relocation and no club merger provisions. So a strong sinking lid policy without the relocation or club merger provisions is the best public health approach available to councils who are keen to minimise harm from gambling across their communities. Now, what we've noticed over the last couple of years, there is a growing trend of confidence amongst councils to adopt sinking lids with variations of relocation and club merger provisions. So at the moment, we have just a little over 50% of councils across New Zealand who have sinking lid policies. We have, for example, Christchurch and Auckland councils have a sinking lid with no relocation. And then we have some smaller councils like Tasman, Lower Hutt, Kawerau, who have sinking lid with no relocation and no club mergers. So there is this growing trend in confidence and acknowledgement that there is harm associated with Class 4 gambling. We are opposed to relocations. Relocations undermine the efficacy of sinking lid policies, they move gambling around, and they have the potential to introduce new people into gambling harm. So when we looked at the DIA data around location of Class 4 venues, we see that 20 out of 24 of the city's Class 4 venues are located in high areas of deprivation. Now, interestingly, you've got 15 venues in your decile 9 to 10 area. Now, there has been no relocation movement in that sector since 2015. We only have the data from DIA from 2015 to 2023. So there has been no movement in those 15 Class 4 venues located in deciles 9 to 10. So in terms of the harm, look, it's no surprise now and commonly known that gambling is a key public health issue. It's a key mental health issue. I think that's a well-accepted fact now. We find that the Class 4 gambling in particular is more prevalent in the lower income households. We've seen from DIA data and from Council's own data that there are more venues located in areas of social deprivation. We know that there is a greater burden placed on those who are less well off. We know that Māori and Pacifica are disproportionately impacted. Now, it was interesting listening to other speakers about, you know, who's the problem gambler and who's not and how many are there and, you know, how big is the problem and so on and so forth. There is very low reporting. We've only got about 16% of those experiencing harm with gambling seeking services. Now, that is similar to other addictions in alcohol and drugs. For Hamilton, the Ministry of Health keeps the National Client Intervention Database. And so we found that in the fiscal year from 21-22, there were 571 people assisted from Hamilton. Bearing in mind, this is only, you know, we're estimating 16%, and this has come from ministry data. We also have 87 individuals who multi-venue excluded themselves. So these are gamblers who are aware that they are at risk from Class 4 venues, and they will work with our pōhiwa, and Peti can talk a little bit more about that, and exclude themselves from a whole host of venues. They're likely to exclude from Hamilton, Cambridge, Morrinsville, wherever they think they may be at risk. So that's an additional source of information that adds another layer of complexity. We've also got to remember that Class 4 is classified as high risk, high turnover gambling. This is not Class 1. This is not your average little sweepstake in the office around the Melbourne Cup. Class 4 is high risk, high turnover gambling, and it is like that for a reason. We find with our client intervention that Class 4 gambling is still the most harmful form of gambling in New Zealand and the primary gambling mode for those seeking help. So, you know, this is just not just a complete walk in the park. But what I would like to do now is just hand the presentation across to Peti, our pōhiwa and health promotion across the Waikato and Bay Plenty areas. And Peti can talk a little bit more about what she actually sees on that daily basis in her role. Thanks, Peti.
Pai marere ki a tātou. Kaitiakitanga is a principle of ethical decision-making for the collective well-being of all peoples, particularly Māori as tangata whenua. In reference to our submission, as an organisation, our concern for the communities living in areas of high social and economic deprivation has been met by the views of the community, particularly in Frankton, in a collaboration with our partners Te Kōhao Health. The level of harm impacting on the lives is reflected in the comments within our submission, and I'd like to explore in more detail examples of extended interactions we've had with the public from the community of Hamilton, with 3 case studies highlighting the broad range of harm that gambling has on the lives of our peoples. We heard from a woman whose husband's prolific gambling in terms of remortgaging their home without her consent from the bank. Consequently, the stress and burden of his gambling led to his death, leaving his wife to carry the financial responsibility of his debts created by gambling. The anger and the grief that she experienced conveyed the deepest levels of gambling harm impacting on the lives of our communities. We also met another woman who, on meeting us, was going home to leave her husband because his years of gambling was no longer tolerable for her. And then thirdly, we heard from another woman whose son, with a young family, and his gambling was so out of control and burdening on the family's ability to thrive and flourish and maintain a standard of living was too much for the mother. So those are examples of how gambling impacts on the people of ordinary people living in Hamilton. In closing, councillors, we urge you to consider responsibilities for the collective well-beings of all peoples, especially our most vulnerable, based on the feedback received on their behalf, especially as Dr. Richards stated, that the money is not equitably returned to the areas with high deprivation where the money has been taken from. Back to you, Kay.
Thanks, Petty. And look, I just want to, stress that the gambling harm can be quite invisible. It's not as obvious as closing hour in a pub or someone smoking or vaping. It's a lot more invisible than that. But look, what we would like to ask is that council, in its decision making, consider the direct and indirect impacts of Class 4 gambling in the city. The $27.22 million spend per year has an impact. We support the sinking lid. We acknowledge and commend council for its minimisation policy, and we encourage council to go further. Thank you.
Thank you for your submission. I see a couple of questions on the board here, so we'll turn to Councillor Wilson.
Chair Mark, thank you for your presentation and your examples of the issues you're facing or that you engage with. My questions are not to do with harm. I accept that there is harm associated with gambling. My questions are, can you point to any data, statistical data, that helps me understand that the current policy that we have is working to reduce harm?
We do have a national study that looked at the efficacy of sinking lid policies, and that was conducted by a guy called Irwin. And we know from that study only looked at the expenditure, but what we did learn from that study, and Irwin is from the Auckland University of Technical New Zealand Work Research Institute. So he published the paper Capping Problem Gambling in New Zealand, the efficacy of local government policy intervention. So there is that study, and what Irwin found, they looked across capped policies and sinking lids per capita caps, and they looked at other sinking lid policies, and what he found was that the sinking lid policies had the most impact on problem gambling spending, and that was reduced by 13%.
Over what period?
That would have just been for that period of time that sinking lid policy would have been in place.
But
so
each jurisdiction, each council, some have, some don't. Some have had it for 4 or 5 years, some have had it for longer. What was the analysis over which jurisdictions and for what period?
Well, that would have just been looking at across all of those sinking lids. And look, I really appreciate the question, because council only has a small window of options around a sinking lid policy. And so it's not the magic bullet, but it is a cog in the wheel amongst other things that are occurring in the gambling environment.
Right.
And so what council chooses is important.
Right. Would you mind circulating that report so we can have a look at it?
Certainly.
Last question is the issue of deprivation and the locations and the number of these outlets in areas of deprivation. No disagreement. Why are you against the ability to move out of areas of deprivation and lower economic incomes? Why are you against?
We're certainly not against a venue relocating. We're just saying we'll certainly relocate, but don't take the machines with you. It just simply moves the gambling around and introduces new people to gambling harms. So we have no problem moving out, but don't take the machines with you. And when we think about, if we look at the gambling opportunity within Hamilton City, we've got 706 pokies, including the 330 at the casino. We've got a new vulnerable population in the CBD in emergency housing. You know, there's a lot of opportunity for harm to occur. Moving the gambling around, do we need it? People are pretty mobile these days. You know, they can find a venue. So, you know, as we say, look, we recognise council has such a small window of opportunity in terms of the gambling environment. And we commend you for your leadership. We encourage that leadership. We encourage you to go further. We see the harm on a daily basis, and, you know, and we will continue to advocate for those consumer protections.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Ewan. Thank you for your answers. Staff will circulate that report for us. I believe that's right, Amish. Yep. Right, Councillor Hart.
Thank you. Thank you for your submission. I noted in your written submission, according to the 2018 census, the median income in Hamilton City is 30,000. In comparison, every machine in Hamilton made on average around 72,000. That means a pokie machine made more than 42,000 more than the average person in the district. I appreciate the census is frustrating at times piece of stats to grapple with because it only happens every 5 years. But I was wondering, do you have any indication about how those numbers may have changed between 2018 and just in terms of the comparison of the two numbers?
No, that will be up to date. And again, we've just averaged. We don't have that privileged information across the societies of what their machines are delivering. So that was just basically a maths question. We've got X amount of machines, we've got X amount of expenditure. This is what the average machine is delivering. So, and this is, and the average income, what was it, 30,200?
Yes.
So your average poker machine is making more than the median income. So it was really just a point of comparison around, you know, if we want to jiggle some numbers and look at a bit of context.
And do you have any information on whether or not because it's 40% of that goes back into the community through the trusts, but do you have any information on the spread of that and that money back into the community?
So I think, so in Hamilton you had a 27,222,000 rounding it off, spend in 2022, and I think from memory, just quickly looking at our submission, you had about 9 million come back, something like that. Does that sound about right? The Department of Internal Affairs have a website called Granted, and all of the societies' distribution of funds is posted on that. For Hamilton, in the 2022 calendar year, 1.64 million of your return, I think it was, you had $8,543,335 returned back to your community from a 27.222 million spend. 1.6 million went to the Waikato Rugby Union. We know that the casino, Sky City, also returned about 1 million to 35 organisations across the Waikato region. But again, we don't have the sensitivity of their data exactly where that went to. But the Granted website gives you all of the societies, where the societies have placed their money and how it's broken down in terms of sport, community health and so on and so forth. Does that answer your question?
Sorry, I might just interject and add to what Kay has just said. And reports from the Ministry of Health and the Department of Internal Affairs have repeatedly shown that money coming out of pokies in more deprived communities, 74% of the money lost is returning to. So the proportion of money coming out of high deprivation and going back to those proportions are very, very clear. So money is lost in those areas, but they get fewer of the funding. And that is a national, across the board. We don't have Hamilton specific, but these reports have been showing that specific pattern across the board.
Thanks,
Christy. Because, that largely does, I guess the curiosity was about, I think it was an 80%
Yeah, we're getting into a question there.
Are you correct? No, it was if we know in 80% is the pokies are in 80% of the lowest deprivation areas, then do we know if 80% of that funding is going back into those areas? But we don't, from what you've said. Okay.
We know that.
Okay.
Okay. I've just pulled the report. So more deprived communities, so that's decile 6 to 10, provides 74% of the GMP or the amount lost, but they only receive around 12% of grants.
Okay.
Thank you, Christy.
Thank you. That was
Thanks,
the
Christy.
clarification.
Right, that's a good line of questioning. Thank you for your submission this morning. Sorry, there's two more questions. Okay. Councillor Kirsch.
Thank you. Just a follow-on from that answer. I mean, I'm just trying to understand your position about relocation. Would it not make sense then to move those sites to lower deprivation areas?
The data that we have from DIA indicates there has been no movement in those 15 venues in those deciles 9 to 10 since 2015. So there's been no attempt for them to move. Now, we don't know what that is. We don't know whether it's because council has a more restrictive policy. We suggest not, because there has been movement in the 7 to 8 decile bracket over the years. We continue to support a strong sinking lid with no relocation and no club merger.
Also, a reminder, pokies are designed to be addictive, and with all the harm that's generated from the addiction of interacting with the pokie machine, you would be risking another community by relocating.
You're introducing new people.
But removing it from
harmful
the
gambling.
current community.
Yeah.
That's great,
Yeah.
but why would you go and risk another
Yeah.
community?
Like,
Okay, I
people
think
are not
slowly
protected.
sort of sliding into a
Sorry,
debate
I'll-
here.
I'll
So,
ask my-
yeah.
Look, people are not protected by either wealth or education to gambling. So it's not, you can't just say that it's people who are living in areas of high social deprivation that we know that they are most impacted because the statistics tell us that, but they're not the only ones impacted. So it's not, this is not a, you know, the nature of pokies, again, it is class 4. It is classified as high risk, high turnover.
I just had a question on you in your submission. You referred to, and you just spoke about your funding envelope, and you guys do amazing work. I was just curious because we've heard earlier that there was unspent money within the ministry for a problem gambling levy. So do you have access?
We can't comment on that. That's not our
Yeah,
role.
no, that you would have to direct that question to the Ministry of Health. We're not privy
hope
to
you
that.
did. Thank you.
Good, thank you. Mayor Paula, would you like to ask a quick question?
In terms of reference 17, which is the Irwin study, which I am interested in, the effectiveness, because that's the one that relates to local government, there is no link. Can we be provided, please, with the full study? Some of the others have links.
Staff are going to get onto that. Yep.
Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Mayor Paula, and thank you for your submission today. Appreciate you.
Just in our submission, we have linked that study to reference 17. So if you look on the references in our submission, that study is there under number 17. And so it's Irwin, Lees, Pacheco, Turco are capping problem gambling in New Zealand.
Yep. Thanks,
But I
Kate.
don't see a link.
Thanks,
Oh, I
Mayor.
see.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
Oh.
We'll get onto that.
Okay, thank you
Good
so
one.
much for your time. We appreciate it.
Thank you. Right.
Thank you, Christy.
Thank you. Mr. David Smart. Welcome, David. Thank you for taking the time to come in.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
We've come along supporting the proceeds of the gambling trusts because it's very important to our club, and that has caused some wonderful outcomes from that. And so we have put our submission in, and we have suggested what we think is the right thing to do. So this is not a long submission, but it's very vital for our club, and particularly in some of our capital expenditures, and it has made our club one of the leading clubs in New Zealand. So we've been very pleased about that, and we have a lot of very contented members and their families and their children. So that's our submission.
Right, thank you. Councillor Wilson, you have a question of
thanks.
Mr Smart.
Chair, we've heard a lot today about the disparity between deprivation, low economic parts of our society spending large amounts of money on machines, but when funds come back into the community, they're not evenly dispersed, and in fact they don't go back to areas of low deprivation. Are all your members wealthy?
I wouldn't say that, no.
So do you feel you've got a fair representation across all economic spectrums?
Yeah, I think so.
And what do you do as a club to encourage access to all members of society?
Well, we're open. We've got a permanent manager who fronts an office, and she welcomes anybody who comes along and is interested.
Have you ever analysed your membership and then put them where they live against a map of Hamilton to work out where they are from?
No, we haven't done that.
No. So, final question, would you be concerned, well, are you concerned with the suggestion that the funds that you receive, that you benefit from and your club benefit from, come from the most vulnerable?
Well, I'm not sure about that. Am I my brother's keeper? Propensity to gamble is widespread. I don't think it's just in the, areas that are not well off. That's just as prevalent in areas which are very well off. So I'm not sure about that.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Wilson. Thank you for taking the time to come in today, David. Appreciate it. Yeah, and thank you for your manager coming along as well. Okay, so the next submitter is online, is Serene, but I just need to let members know that she has some supporters in the chamber who may or may not take pictures. Oh, she's here. Oh, sorry. Yeah. Photos. Is there an objection? Photos of the speaker. So, sorry, that's lack of clarification on my... Yeah. Right, welcome to the chamber, Serene. The floor is yours.
Morena tātai. Nei mai ngā hua, nei mai ngā pai, nei mai kia nui, kia hawere ai, tihei mauriora. Te mea tuatai, me mihi ki te atua, he whakakororia tōna ingoa. Te mihi tuarua ki te kingi Māori, atu hei tia pōtatai te whirowhiro te tuawhitu, o tira, ki te whare ka hui ariki, pai mārire ki a rātou. He mihi tēnei ki te mana whenua, ngā te wairere me ngā te mahanga, tēnā koutou. Ki ngā hapu, ngā marae me ngā kārangaranga o Waikato tani wharau, tēnā koutou katoa. E ngā rangatira o te kaunihira o Kirikiriroa. Mayor Southgate, Deputy Mayor Leering, tēnā kōrua. Chairman Donovan, tēnā koe. Esteemed members of the Hamilton City Council, nei rā ngā mihi ki a tātou katoa. My name is Serene Tiokotai. This is my colleague, Daniel Milesworth, and it's an honour to speak to you today on behalf of Te Kōhao Health in relation to our submission made about the Class 4 gambling venues policy and TAB venues policy. Te Kōhao Health is a kaupapa Māori organisation deeply committed to improving the health outcomes of Māori. Our core values centre on recognising and respecting the unique cultural and historical context of Māori communities, along with acknowledging the existing health disparities. We work collectively with iwi Māori healthcare providers and communities to develop culturally responsive, equitable and sustainable solutions. Te Koho Health actively engages with Māori stakeholders to ensure their perspectives are integrated into all health initiatives, promoting inclusivity and breaking down barriers to access. We empower Māori to make informed health decisions and take ownership of their well-being. Beyond treatment and care, we address the root causes of health disparities, including social determinants of health and systemic inequities, seeking long-term improvements in Māori health and wellness. Our approach is grounded in tikanga Māori and Māori community aspirations, aiming for a more equitable and healthier future for all. We believe it is crucial for the Hamilton City Council to consider the implications of gambling for our whānau, hapu and iwi Māori, and implement effective regulations that balance economic interests with social responsibility. As such, we propose the following. In regards to the Hamilton City Council's policy options for TAB venues, Te Koho Health supports option 1, which proposes to continue with the current policy and not allow for any new TAB venues to be established in Hamilton, nor any relocation for current TAB venues. In regards to Hamilton City Council's policy options for Class 4 gambling venues, Te Koho Health supports option 2, which proposes a sinking lid which allows for neither relocation or venue measures. First and foremost, we firmly believe that prevention is better than cure. To mitigate the impact of gambling harm on Māori communities in Hamilton from Class 4 gaming establishments, we advocate for 1, non-relocation of gambling establishments in low socio-economic areas. 2, no measures with gambling establishments. And 3, continued application of the sinking lid policy. We advocate in this manner as Māori communities are disproportionately affected by problem gambling. Research indicates that Māori adults are more likely to participate in gambling activities, leading to a higher prevalence of problem gambling within the Māori population. Problem gambling in Māori communities has far-reaching consequences, including financial instability, social disruption, and heightened mental health issues. Mitigating these consequences requires a multifaceted approach, including the prevention of gambling establishment expansion in low socio-economic areas. Communities such as Enderley, Fairfield and Norton, with significant Māori populations, are particularly vulnerable and should be protected from further harm. We take this opportunity to commend you, the Council, for your strong harm minimisation focus and for proposing to retain its sinking lid policy in most of the policy options offered for consultation. In our view, allowing Class 4 venues to either relocate or merge undermines the efficacy of a sinking lid policy and simply moves gambling around. Our organisation encourages councils and the government to take a closer look at the relationship between harmful gambling, social disparity, and a funding model that can contribute to this. Funding communities based on a system that relies on our lowest income communities, putting money they can ill afford into gambling machines, is both unethical and inequitable. The saturation of Class 4 venues in areas of high social deprivation and the resulting harm placed on these communities is disproportionately borne by Māori. We urge Hamilton City Council to adopt these proposed measures to protect our low socio-economic areas from the harmful impact of gambling establishments. By refraining from relocation and mergers and applying the sinking lid policy, we can create a more equitable and resilient community while safeguarding the well-being of Māori and other vulnerable populations. E ki ana te kōrero ki ngā tāwhia. Ko tahi anō te kōhao o te ngira. E kuhana ai te miro mā, te miro whiro, te miro pango. There is but one eye of the needle through which the white, red and black threads must pass. This is a solemn reminder for us all that by working together we can take significant steps towards a safer, healthier and more inclusive future for residents of our city. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank you for your time today and hearing us. Nō reira, tēnā koutou, kia ora mai tātou katoa.
Kia ora, Serene and Daniel. I can see one question from the floor, from the chamber, sorry. Councillor Wilson.
Yeah, thanks, Chair Mark. Kia ora koutou. I know the work you do and it's good work, so thank you for the effort. What work are you currently doing in regards to online gambling harm within the broader Māori population?
with regards to that, for Gambling Harm Awareness Week, we went to the casino and spent time there interfacing with patrons of the casino, spreading awareness about problem gambling. We also met with the gambling harm team that they have at the casino and helped them work on their problem gambling efforts. And we will continue growing that relationship going forward.
Thank you. Thanks for that good work. But in regards to online harm.
Online?
Yeah.
I think we might.
Point of order, Chair.
Thank you, Sarah. Yeah, thanks, Sarah. I think we'll leave the online thing, park that to for the moment, because that's out of scope for today's hearing, if you don't
I
mind.
respect your ruling, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Sorry to cut you off like that, Sarah, but I was kind of felt like I was across it. Does anyone else have any? Mayor Southgate.
Just a quick question to be kind of level-handed. We've heard this morning from a variety of physical activity organisations, etc. Have you got a comment on the relativity between the harm done by gambling and the relativity of harm done by not being able to access sport or participate in physical activity vis-a-vis your the health data is also pretty uncomfortable for Māori, right, in the health arena. Any comment on that?
Well, if there's no access to funds, there's no ability to pay for sport, because everything costs. And let alone if you can't feed your children, you can't pay for sporting events.
Right, so you're saying the impact is on the pocket of the whānau, who therefore can't pay for a uniform or sports fees or something, that they don't do that?
Yeah, it starts at the baseline. I mean, people can't even pay to feed their children, let alone pay for sports. And at the community level is affected as well, because people don't participate due to stigma and shame. So they don't leave their houses, and they don't participate in community events.
Okay, thank you.
And I think, just to further on what Daniel said, if we look at the concept of gambling harm, it's not entirely understood in terms of, say, data collection. Most systems in place at the moment, such as the CLIC system, which is widely used throughout New Zealand to collect gambling statistics. Those statistics only pertain to the gambler in particular. It doesn't include the harm that is caused to the wider family with that. So majority of those statistics from that specific system only allocates the damage that is done specifically to that one person. So it doesn't include the wider whānau and how the effects are spread out across their wider lands as well. So trying to, I suppose, find statistics in that arena specifically pertaining to that can be quite difficult, simply because of the systems that are used to collect the information in the first place.
Okay, thank you.
Cool. Thank you. Thank you for your submission today. Appreciate it. You making the effort to come in and submit.
Ngā mihi.
Yep. Kia ora. Yep. Thank you.
Do you want to? Thank you,
The audit, Thomas. Yep. Right. So next into the chamber is Thomas Nabbs. Welcome, Thomas.
Thank you.
Yeah. You're speaking on behalf of Te Tamawai Trust.
Yep.
Right.
Never been to one of these things before.
Oh, crikey, I just took it for granted. Apologies. So you've got 10 minutes.
Yeah.
to put forward your submission.
Sure.
What I would encourage you to do is leave a couple of minutes at the end, just in case there's any questions of my colleagues.
Cool.
Yeah. But the whole 10 minutes is yours.
I won't need that.
Okay.
It's very simple in that, look, acknowledge the harm that gambling can do, but in my opinion, and I suppose representative of Te Tamoai Trust as well, the benefits to the community outweighs the harm, and so much of the fabric of society in clubs and community groups that are community groups unfortunately rely on this for the good work that they do. And I think that the recipe as it is at the moment is the best of the alternatives. And that isn't to say that there isn't some harm done. I think we can all acknowledge that, but I think the alternative is less. So that's the crux of it, really. The benefits outweigh the harm, in my opinion, in my experience, and that's on the ground from, I think, both worlds as well. I'll say I gamble myself, and have had family and friends that have been serious problem gamblers, and I've seen the effects of that and lived with that in my household. And so, yep, I've seen that side of things, but I still think the benefits outweigh the harm, and with the gambling support and the problem gambling support, that's absolutely necessary. But yeah, I'll leave it at that.
Okay, thanks, Thomas. And Councillor Wilson.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks for coming along, Thomas. Good to see you. My question relates to whether or not, just for clarity, if you would support moving some of the venues out of areas of low deprivation to other areas of the city. Currently, the policy has a sinking cap and doesn't enable any movement unless it's earthquake or sanitary building arguments, or if the landlord won't renew the rental. Your view on that?
I would support being able to move them.
Right.
Especially if it's from a lower deprivation area.
Thank you.
Councillor Kish.
Hi, how are you? Thank you for coming in. I was just interested, we've had a lot of discussion around the redistribution of funds, and interested in the trust you're involved with, and how do you approach the equity discussion? You know, do you target everybody or specific areas, specific people in terms of equity?
Our trust itself, by nature and by purpose, supports disadvantaged and disengaged and people. And so disadvantaged through poverty, through ability, and through minority as well. And we stay pretty true to that. We do support people who come from families and communities that have very low socioeconomic. We're not. That's not to say that there aren't some people that we support who are probably above average economically, but they'll have some sort of they'll fit our criteria in some way. But high proportion, we support people who are from those lower socioeconomic communities. Is that answering your question?
Yep,
I think there was a second part of that, yeah.
It does. And just one question, because in your submission you have talked about yourself being a gambler.
Yeah.
And that you
Forgot I did that.
You do it online?
Yeah, I do.
So just from your personal perspective,
yeah,
in terms of harm minimization in a physical versus online, you know, I take it, I won't say just your perspective of, you know, physical versus online in terms
And
of
harm minimisation.
Yeah.
It's probably harder, I think, online. So I've worked in pubs before, been duty managers in charge of Class 4 gambling machines as well. And you can identify those people who you'd put at high risk. And you've got, so I used to work at the Boston and at the Prince Albert in Cambridge, and we would communicate with other pubs as well, and say, hey, this person's in here, and you'd obviously have it recorded, and so you'd be able to try and step in and help them or identify that they need help. Sometimes tell one of their friends. If like a small community like Cambridge, you used to be able to say, hey, you need to go and have a chat with someone or something, and it's pretty clear and obvious, and you've got a responsibility to look after your patrons in that regard. It's different online, so it becomes more about, I think, the individual user, and sometimes, like, I love having a punt on rugby, I love having a punt on the horses, and sometimes, especially after a big win or two, I might blow a little bit more than I thought it was, but I've got I suppose the ability to say, okay, Thomas, rein it in a little bit, you need to take a break for a week or so, and it'll never be, it's never got to a problem situation for me, but I'm self-aware enough to put those limitations on myself. Now, I can see, well, it's quite clear and obvious that gambling's an addictive thing and can be quite harmful, and if you don't have that ability to do that to yourself, then you don't have that support like you do in the Class 4, in theory anyway. I'm sure different venues and different managers do that to different levels, but in my opinion, and in my personal experience, it's much more up to the individual if it's online.
Thank you. Thank you.
Councillor
Thank you,
Kesh. Councillor Wilson, I see you've relit up.
Got a few minutes left. So
Yep.
thank you for your candour and your explanation. I found that very helpful. I've asked quite a few times whether or not our current policy is in fact moving people to online gambling. And of course, revenue then doesn't flow back to the community. Can I have your view on that, in the sense that are we in danger of trying to make it so restrictive in the pursuit of minimising harm, we're actually just transferring the harm off online, and no members of the community benefit from the funding streams?
I can only answer anecdotally. I don't have the research on that. My gut feel is that there will be a correlation. I don't think it'll be 100% correlation in that if we were to reduce Class 4 gambling, they would all go onto online, but I definitely do think there'd be some, and look, that's only an anecdotal gut feeling from someone who's played both and is it had a lot of fun as well. I don't think we should discredit that. We're focusing a lot on the harm caused by gambling. The reason that I gamble is because, man, it's good fun, and especially I gamble in the living room with my family, with my in-laws at the moment. Often on a Sunday afternoon, me and my father-in-law sit down and have a little bit of a punt on the horses, and it's great. And but yeah, we've got that, I suppose, ability to turn it off. Would it transfer? The thing is, you've got to put yourself into that public and into the pub environment in the first place. Yeah, it's hard for me to say. I do think there'll be a correlation, but I'd hand on heart say it wouldn't be 100%, but there would be, I'd pick over 50, yeah.
Thank you.
Councillor Wilson. Thanks, Thomas. Thanks for coming in. I don't see any further questions. I appreciate you taking time out of your day to come and talk to us, and keep up the great work that you do with the Water Boy.
Thanks, councillors. Appreciate it.
All right. Awesome. Right, the last submitter on the list is Heidi Gleeson. Welcome, Heidi.
Hi everyone. I'm a bit nervous, so at least I've got a bit of a less of a crowd now.
Well,
watching.
don't be nervous. Just take your time. You've got 10 minutes, and
Thank you.
encourage you to leave some time there for some questioning.
I did bring a short presentation just to back up what I'm saying, and really I'm here to support the fact that Class 4 gambling does provide crucial funding support for many not-for-profit organisations, and I'm here on behalf of True Colours Children's Health Trust, and we're a recipient of those funds. In our view, reducing venues and machines reduces community funding, and without an identified new funding stream, this does create risk to our and many other organisations' sustainability. I thought I'd tell you a little bit about our service and how those funds do benefit us. So we're a trust that provides a free service to children with a serious health condition in their whānau, including nursing and psychosocial support. Our support is offered from the time of diagnosis through to cure, bereavement or ongoing adjustment to living with a life-limiting illness. Support starts from as early as potentially a 20-week scan when there may be a health condition picked up via a scan right through to teenage years. I thought I'd give you a snapshot of us in numbers. So referrals so far in 2023, we've had 200 referrals into our service, and that includes 51 re-referrals of people who have utilised the service before and need further support. That compares to 238 last year and 258 in 2021. So I think if our referrals keep up the pace they are, we'll hit sort of record numbers. Children's deaths so far is 9. And the funding we get from gaming trusts is about 20% of our funding total. We've just taken on 2 new staff in the last few weeks, so it takes us up to 9 in total, not all full-time, but that's just, it's being careful not to be too reactive. We're pretty mindful of how we spend our money, but it's also ensuring that we can serve the people that get referred to us in a timely fashion. So I know at the moment there's lots in health about waiting lists. We don't have a waiting list system. We appreciate that when a family is referred to us, are generally in a time of high distress, so we like to get to them as soon as we can, which is essentially immediately. So our geographical region that we cover, so our core business is in Hamilton City, of course, and then we do what was essentially the Greater Waikato District Health Board region, like down as far as Taumarunui, Tokoroa, up to Meremere, Coromandel and out to Raglan. Within those communities, lots of vulnerable families that we support. I guess we know that New Zealand's health sector is in a challenging position at the moment. While we can't solve the greater problems, what we can do is support the children and the families we do, and we know that we make a big difference to them. I think just sort of touching on a couple of questions that have come up earlier to different people, a lot of the families we support wouldn't be able to pay for our service. We do provide a free service to ensure equitable care to everyone within our community. We're seeing lots of families that are impacted by not only the child with a serious health condition, but lots of social issues. So it's definitely huge. I think there's a tension between charitable organisations and gaming trusts, but that funding is really vital for us. So I guess just to round off, we support a capped policy, maintaining the current numbers, and we support the expansion of a relocation provision within, of course, approved guidelines. Thank you.
Thanks, Heidi. Right, Councillor Wilson.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. First of all, thank you so much for the work you do. It is incredibly important, so thank you. My question relates to collection of data.
Yes.
So you receive funding.
Yes.
Has any party, whether it's the National Health Service or other entities, ever inquired of you of where those funds flow geographically within the city in terms of areas of high or low deprivation? Are you ever asked to provide that data?
No, not specifically. We do, and I don't have numbers here, but we obviously have addresses of all the families we care for, and in a broad sense, just track whether they're from a rural community or from the city. But absolutely, we could dig down into our records and find that information. I don't know what the numbers are, but we certainly do support a high number of vulnerable families, you know, from the health perspective, but also living environments. Yeah, it would be easy to, well, you know, a bit of work, but we could do that.
Yeah, I'm surprised that no organisation's asking for that information.
Yeah, well, I guess maybe we don't get any DHB funding, so perhaps if they were a funder of ours, they might request that information. But
Right.
I guess we're a community-funded organisation, so yeah, we're pretty autonomous in how we're able to run and potentially who we report back to.
Last question. If, in theory, as the number of machines reduce as part of the sinking lid, where else would you get your funds to do your work?
Well, unfortunately, I don't think we'd get it from central government, no offence. You know, I just don't
You
think...
certainly won't offend us in local government by saying that.
No, central government, local government, it's just, yeah, it's tricky. And I don't think that commercial business will entirely meet that as well. I mean, we see huge generosity from our community. We are 100% community funded, but there's still going to be a shortfall. And I think in recent years, Gaming Trust made up 40% of our funding. That's at about 20% at the moment, so we have got extra support, but it's still 20% is a big figure. And we're a service organisation. We've just taken on 2 new staff, so while our staff are our greatest asset, they're also our greatest expense. Gaming Trust absolutely help us fund those staff that are working directly with families.
Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Wilson. And I'll just reiterate what Councillor Wilson said at the start. Thank you for the fantastic work that you do in the community. It's much appreciated. No other questions? Nope. Okay. Thank you for your time today, Heidi.
Thank you very much.
Yep. Welcome. Right, colleagues, that brings us to the end of submitters. Now I'd like to call in the very well known to us all, Carmen. And Greg. Sorry.
Kia ora koutou, ko Carmen Fuchs to Whenua. So the purpose of this meeting is to hear and consider the verbal submissions and consider the points made through both the verbal submissions and the written submissions. And I'd really like to take the time to thank all of the submitters that came in to speak today. We've heard from both sides of the spectrum, and it's really great to see so many people wanting to provide input to the policy. You would have seen Greg and I typing very furiously in the background. And that's just us trying to gather as much information from the submitters and from yourselves as well. So the next steps is to bring all of this information to the Community and Natural Environment Committee on the 26th of October, not November like the staff report says. That is my fault, apologies. And we will now take the opportunity to hear from all of you as to what you would like to see in that report.
Cool. Thanks, Carmen. So, reminder, this is where we provide direction, and I'm sure, as Carmen reiterated, you've heard some fairly consistent themes coming through today. I'd open the floor and let, there we go, Councillor Wilson.
Yeah,
would you like to lead us
thanks,
off?
Chair. Thanks, team. What will really help me in the final report is the following. Any specific hard data from a reliable peer-reviewed source that show any correlation or data outputs that link from when we've had a sinking lid to any reduction of harm? That's the first one. Second one is, there's been a lot of discussion about multiple sites in low deprivation areas, and frequently those advocating for more restriction talk about the large percentage of spend that occurs there, but there is a tiny amount of funds that flow back. But we've heard from some submitters that no one's asking them where the funds permeate to. And so I'm just trying to answer that question. And my final question is there any hard data that says that by moving a city out of one area of low deprivation to a other area of the city with of high deprivation to low deprivation, is there any data at all that says that those people move with it, or that it affects new people? I'm just trying to get my head around that data. And that's it.
So thanks, Councillor Ewan. Anyone else got any input they want to? Yes, Councillor Kesh.
Thank you. Very similar to what Councillor Ewan's just talked of. But also, if we were to look at an equity lens on the redistribution of the funding, where does that happen? Is it is it something that's in our policy, or is it the grassroots and the funding people's decision?
So the distribution of funding sits with the gaming trusts. So they will have their applications open and people can apply. So that's not something that we can influence in the sense of telling them who to allocate funding to. I think the only way that council could potentially influence would be to go to groups itself, or be a conduit for saying, hey, look, there's funding for, or make its own applications, which is another separate discussion.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. It was a very interesting morning, actually. I would be interested in understanding a little bit around where the current legislation sits in terms of relocations. We heard about that. Just getting a bit more background to make sure in what ways we are consistent or inconsistent with central government legislation. That would be very interesting to me. I would like also to have the paragraph, whatever it was, about the code of the conflict of interest, because they have got an independent legal review there, so I think we should address that more clearly. And I was wondering with the relocations, if anybody else has a relocation policy that restricts it to certain areas, so out of neighbourhoods, out of local neighbourhood shopping centres and whatever, to, I don't know, other areas where people don't necessarily live and walk around. Would like to understand that a bit more. I am looking for the evidence of that Irwin report, because that was 2020 or 20 something or other. Was in the 20s as opposed to in the teens. We didn't have a link to that, but since it relates to local government intervention, I think it's important that we do understand that. I am interested in the unspent money, the Ministry of Health. It's interesting, we do hear from Whatu Ora, but we don't hear from the Ministry of Health. So I'm interested if they have, in fact, the ministry itself has done any recent research into this issue at all, whether it's on the health side, the Ministry of Health would, but have any other government departments done recent research into the effects of gambling one way or the other. That's it, I guess. It's going to be really hard to do it, but I was very much interested in that whole relativity, and that may be the wrong word, between the harm that having reduced access to physical education goes, because some of those clubs actually provide sportswear and fees and memberships for people, and people who would not normally have the access to the gear. Some do. So I would be interested in that. The cost of, harm vis-a-vis things like inactivity, obesity, social deprivation because you're not mixing in a group or a club or something. I think because otherwise we're being asked to pair apples with pears, I just find that really difficult because we all accept that gambling causes harm. So I just would like to understand that a wee bit better. And that's me. Thank you.
Sorry, I can probably speak to the question.
I was going to speak to the question around conflicts of interest.
I've had a look at the comments that have been made in the submission. The first point that's made by the association in their submission, saying being a member of a club or organisation that receives funding will not usually give rise to a conflict of interest when it comes to deciding or discussing council's gambling venue policy, unless a member holds a paid role. So what they're saying isn't incorrect. Certainly holding a paid role would point more clearly to an elected member having a conflict of interest, but there's a range of things that an elected member might want to consider for themselves. Generally speaking, where this would sit is in a perception of conflict of interest rather than a pecuniary one, which obviously has different obligations and ramifications that are tied to it. So, I don't know that that's really a thing that we need to concern ourselves with necessarily in terms of a council-wide discussion. It is something that elected members all have to consider themselves, and in the past I have had conversations with elected members just to talk through those things. And again, on the closed mind matter, we have done training on this as well, and we have talked about it. And I would also say that the statements that they've made around predetermination are probably not that helpful, because an elected member is entitled to have their view, and it would be quite unusual for an elected member to not have a view on something like gambling and gambling harm. And my view is that we'd be looking for a fairly high threshold in terms of statements and some kind of predetermination about having a completely closed mind for a meeting. But we can address it a bit more closely in the report if needed.
Chair, was this in relation to historical where we had an elected member that also worked for...
It spoke to two things. It talked people being associated with clubs, but also people having an outward view that was so totally entrenched. So you might be in the media or something.
Right.
I mean, it's in the report. It's got two whole full paragraphs explicitly stated, and then it had
He's no longer here.
Attachment with a legal opinion.
Because Dave Mack was working for the gambling harm people for a period of time. I think that's what this is referring to.
Yeah. But I think it's one of those things, because it comes with an attached piece of legal advice. It's not a gloss over thing that we do. It is a thing that we make a proper, decent, and thank you for sharing on the first cut your view, but that is something we need to respond to in full. So we don't need that kind of legal thing holding there.
Well, it would sit somewhere in the risk register, wouldn't it?
Well, I think we need a response that is, which is well reasoned and well set out.
Yep.
It's not a sort of also ran idea.
Yeah.
Because actually, it could come up again in terms of other council business at one stage. So this will be very helpful to have had a look at.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mish. Councillor Hutt.
Thank you. I guess something that I'd be really interested to see is, are there any public health departments, appreciate you might have to look outside New Zealand, which have a policy on gambling harm? Is it a sinking lid? Is it something else? I would assume that because Te Whatu Ora has put in their submission on behalf of the National Public Health Service that there wouldn't be a different one nationally here, but just curious about whether there's a best practice elsewhere about gambling harm in a similar context.
Thanks, Councillor Louise. Councillor... Oh, sorry, I was going to go to Sarah online. Yep. So, hi, Sarah. Ooh.
Thanks, Chair. One of my questions was just whether we could have a look to see if there is any useful evidence or information around the question of the impact of reducing machines on online gambling. And I'm just thinking if there's anything else. I did have one more, sorry, but it's now escaped me.
That's okay. Well, if you think of it, you can feel free to come back in a timely fashion.
Thanks.
Councillor Kesh.
Thank you. I just had a process question. During the consultation, there was a question in that document around support of funding to council, you know, whether council would receive funds from Class 4 gambling. And
Yes.
we haven't heard much about that.
So unfortunately, I can just quickly answer that. We did have that in the consultation document, which was approved. However, immediately after receiving approval for that, the team said, that team had said that they weren't quite ready to go out for that consultation. So
Which
that
team,
question,
sorry?
so that would have been the community team that deals with the community funding.
Okay.
And they just said, look, we're not quite ready to go out for consultation. We do want to wait. So that's why that question did not go out to the community.
All right.
And that will happen at another time.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Sorry about
I prefer
that.
to keep it separate anyway. Thank you.
Good point that you raised, Kesh. Thank you. Councillor Sarah, are you back in
Yes,
in scope?
thank you. Thanks, Chair, for your patience. So the other question was just in terms of relocations, I just wanted to understand, and this information may come to us anyway, but I just wanted to understand what criteria we can have in place, like what is the actual framework around that? Because, yeah, that would be helpful in terms of any what's available to us in terms of discretionary criteria, or is it kind of black and white? This is it. Thank you.
Right. All right, and Councillor Louise.
Sorry, I just had a thought after Sarah's question. If the current policy allows relocation under some circumstances, it would just be really useful to know if any relocations have actually occurred and what was the nature of the relocation. So where did they move to and from, and etc.
And amalgamation.
And any amalgamations as well. Joint mergers, club mergers.
That's good. Good stuff. Okay. Anyone else want to? Any direction? Carmen and Greg, you guys have got a heap there to keep you pretty busy. So, yeah, we'll look forward to receiving your report on the 26th of October. So in the meantime, I'll move the that we have to move.
I'll second.
Move. Yep. Okay. All those in favour?
Sorry. In theory, it can be debated. People, because I know somebody had a
Feeling they wanted to say something, so I'm just helping if you can debate when there's a motion. No, everybody happy?
Yep.
Okay.
Okay, thanks.
Or to help?
Yep.
Somebody wants to raise
Yep. Yep. Point noted. Okay. All those in favour of receiving the reports? Aye. Against? No. Ayes have it.
Motion was carried unanimously.
Yeah. All right. Okay. With that in mind, I'll just about call to close the meeting, but I'll leave you with this. Oh, sorry. I've deleted my Japanese language and I can't recall it off the top of my head, but I'll just leave you with one quick paragraph. We're blessed at this time of year to be able to witness the splendour of the cherry blossom. The message I'd like to share with you is, as we look upon the delicate canopies of the cherry blossoms, let us remember that life, like these blossoms, is fleeting and precious. Just as these flowers bloom for a short time in all their splendour, so too should we embrace each moment with gratitude and joy. With that, thank you for your attendance today. Call the meeting closed.